Story 1.
My wife cheated and shattered my world. How I found strength, fought back, and ultimately forgave. Concerns always lingered for her because I rarely delved into the depth of how her affair impacted and changed me with anyone other than her. I believe she fears that I might harbor some repressed hatred for her, but I don't. It's akin to touching a hot stove. Do it once, and you never purposely do it again. That's how I am about my emotions. I'm not devoid of them, but I choose to keep some safeguarded within myself. I had a conversation with my wife, whom we'll call Jenny. She was fine with it and even encouraged me to include more details than intended. Her reasoning was that everyone needed the complete picture to understand why she ardently pursued reconciliation with me, why it worked for us, and to grasp why I resisted and how I now perceive our love and marriage differently. After the initial draft, I read it and felt an uneasy feeling about how my wife appeared in the story and, subsequently, in our marriage. While she had no issue with the written story, I decided to include this up front. My wife has evolved into an incredible spouse, mother, and woman. She holds a professional degree in her career and is well regarded and admired in her field. She suffered significantly, admittedly due to her actions, and to no lesser degree from me during reconciliation. She truly underwent a transformative process and emerged as strong as steel. Her betrayal was devastating, but in my case, it was the circumstances surrounding the affair that ultimately allowed me to forgive her, not excuse her, but forgive her. I lost a part of the good in me through this pain. In contrast, she emerged from it as a better person. At times, I resent that, but then I see the positivity she has brought to my life over the 23 years since this happened, and it's okay. I'm presenting this chronologically. Obviously, I wasn't aware of some events until later. The details come from writings my wife did for therapeutic reasons, something she also incorporated into our reconciliation process. We still have the notebooks, planning to burn them on our wedding anniversary. We married at. About a year later, I decided to go back to school part-time to finish my degree. Eventually, we had a child, and I felt the pressure to complete my degree. My son had just turned 2 when I started my last year of college. 2 semesters were all I needed. In September my schedule included a part-time job from AM to AM as a store stocker, a full-time administrative job at the police department from AM to PM, Tuesday night classes from PM to PM, and Saturday classes from AM to PM. My wife worked as a nurse's aide at a local hospital from AM to PM. My mother cared for our son, and both our jobs as well as my parents' home were within a minute drive from one another. It was the best setup possible for what I was trying to accomplish. The weekend before today, we were in constant arguments. It was spring of 1994, finals week for me. If I completed my papers and passed my finals by the following Sunday, we would be celebrating my completion of a bachelor's in science and finally ending this 8-month schedule. I was working, but she was upset because I wouldn't take time off from studying to take her and our son somewhere. She had been complaining about my work and school for some time, and it had gotten so bad that we had stopped being close 2 months prior. On this specific Monday evening, I was verifying a research paper I had finished on Saturday, which was due Tuesday evening, and she consistently engaged in arguments. Finally, I instructed her to be quiet and stop behaving like a child. She stared at me and boldly declared, "I hate you, and I am in love with someone else." Just like that. I was stunned. We argued for about an hour until she confessed about an incident earlier that day during lunch at work. For the past 2 months, she had been involved in an emotional affair with a janitor at the hospital. Essentially, it began with him complimenting her and consistently appearing every time she turned around. This progressed to lunch together in the cafeteria and regular sessions of complaining about me to him. About 2 weeks prior, their wine sessions shifted to the car. She later admitted to kissing him twice during that time, but today it escalated into a full makeout session, concluding with romantic activities and a declaration of their love for each other. Upon hearing this, I essentially disconnected from the conscious world, dissociating from all reality. I may delve into further details regarding my thought process that night later. In the meantime, this is what my wife wrote about that moment. It was strange. When I informed him of what we had done, I was fully prepared for some type of outburst. However, he just looked at me with the most horrible pain imaginable. Then it transformed into something indescribable blankness. He turned around and walked to the bedroom, quietly closing the door. I remember getting angry. He wouldn't even fight for me. Right at that moment, I felt I had made the right decision and everything was going to work out. I did it. I was breaking free from the man who had been ignoring me for all these months. Returning to the living room with a suitcase, I walked past her and out the front door. I recall her repeatedly asking where I thought I was going, accusing me of running home to mommy. Placing the suitcase in the driveway, I went back in, grabbed her purse, held it out, and instructed her to leave. This shocked her. She refused. I gently carried her over my shoulder, walked out the door, and sat her on the car hood. Her shock allowed me time to re-enter the house, lock the door, and prevent her attempts to get in. Eventually, she left to stay with her parents, informing them of our separation without disclosing the reason. It was a long night. I informed both jobs of a family emergency, slept at some point, and woke up at 7, immediately planning how to minimize contact with my wife. I called my mother to watch over my son, made a to-do list, dropped my son off, and explained to my mother that we would talk later that day. I then went to the office of a lawyer friend of my family. He had gone to school with my dad, and I knew him all my life. I expressed my desire to initiate divorce proceedings promptly. He attentively listened to my narrative and suggested taking some time to think, but I remained firm. He mentioned he could finalize the divorce papers by the day's end. I informed him I would retrieve them that day and personally file them with the clerk's office. Handling such matters was part of my responsibilities at my department job. Subsequently, I obtained new locks for the house and made a visit to the bank. I closed both our savings and checking accounts, placing half the funds in an envelope. I visited my sister-in-law at her workplace, delivering my wife's share of the money, instructing her to convey that my wife should not contact me, and that this represented her portion from the bank. Additionally, I informed her about canceling our sole credit card. At my mom's place, I divulged all details, and my sister and little sister devised a plan for the latter to stay at my house, caring for my son while I juggled work and school for the remainder of the week. Returning home, I changed the locks, spent the afternoon cleaning and bonding with my son, then proceeded to school. My wife chose not to go to work that day, reaching out to the janitor to share the events. He showed sympathy and invited her to his house that evening to escape the stress. More details about this house will be shared later. In short, she went, and they were close. Here is her account of that night he drifted into sleep afterward. Initially, I felt so thrilled, but as it unfolded and afterward, it started to feel inappropriate. Since he was asleep, my mind began to wander. I reflected on OP and how he had influenced me to seek someone else. I got up and departed. During the drive home, memories of the first time I was close with OP flooded back. We were each other's first and only. I broke down, contemplating how disgusted I was with myself. Then I found myself angry at OP once more. It truly became a sick cycle. I refused to confront the responsibility of the truly terrible thing I had done. I convinced myself it was his fault. 2 days later, that day began as normal. I went to work, came home, showered, and ate breakfast with my son and sister. My wife called and wanted to make arrangements to see our son. Jenny was cocky and spiteful on the phone. I told her that I would meet her Sunday at p.m. and she could spend some time with him at a local park. She wasn't going for that. She wanted him for the weekend. I said no. She knew him staying at the house solved the babysitting issue for right now. Both her parents worked, so she did not push it, but she did slam the phone down. I went to work at the PD, and the first chance I got, I went to the clerk's office and filed for the divorce. Later in the day, I was notified by a girl I knew there that they were ready to go to the sheriff's office to be served. I called a deputy I knew and told him the story and asked him to serve them to her at work. He said he would. The next day, my wife also returned to work. Her janitor came by her station and chatted her up throughout the day. They were not able to eat lunch together that day, nor meet that evening. He claimed he had to go to something with one of his kids. He told my wife earlier in the affair he was divorced and had 3 kids. She went to her parents after work. Later that night, she called me 3 times, and each time I hung up on her. Caller ID was not the norm back then in my area. After another long night of grieving, my day started out like the day before. I went to work. After I arrived at my second job, I received a phone call from the deputy that was going to serve the papers. He told me he would get there around noon. I explained that would be fine. Her lunch hour was from 11 a.m. to noon. I sat at my desk and tried to work. I was antsy and got up and went to the restroom at least 3 times until I finally threw up. I calmed myself and kept reminding myself it was the right thing to do. Thankfully, I had not heard from my wife so far. 11 a.m. that day, my wife meets the janitor for lunch. They retire to his car in the parking lot and do it classy. They clean up, go back inside, and grab something in the cafeteria for lunch. At noon, my wife returns to the nurse's station on her hall along with the janitor and starts talking to the registered nurse in charge of the hall. 5 minutes later, the deputy walks in. He asks the nurse where he can find Jenny. She speaks up, "Yes, that's me." The deputy turns to her and in a loud voice says, "You are being sued for divorce due to infidelity." My wife falls on the floor. Here are her words describing what happened. Upon hearing that, a profound wave of shame and guilt engulfed me. The realization struck that I had irreparably damaged my marriage and that OP was genuinely proceeding with a divorce. A misguided part of me naively clung to the hope that he wouldn't follow through, deluding myself into thinking it was just another argument I could somehow win. Reflecting on it now, it's sick thinking. I distinctly recall the deputy physically lifting me and placing me in a chair amid screams emanating from me. The head nurse attempted to pacify my escalating distress. In the tumult, my affair partner attempted to grasp my hand, and in my emotional turmoil, I struck him. The punch veered to his neck as he recoiled, leaving a scratch. My vehement outburst accused him of ruining my life. They managed to soothe her. The deputy informed her that the janitor promptly left, allowing her to resume her shift, however. A colleague nurse provided significant cover for her. 3 hours later, as Jenny neared the end of her shift, she received a summons to the hospital administrator's office, leaving her frightened, suspecting someone had reported her outburst. Upon arrival, the lady closed the door and promptly delivered the news of her termination, instructing her not to return to the property and that her last check would be sent through the mail. It appeared that someone had witnessed the incident in the parking lot and reported it, triggering subsequent events. The head nurse, informed about the divorce papers, shared the story, leading to the janitor being questioned, fired, and escorted off the property an hour before Jenny's termination. The entire hospital was now aware of the unfolding drama. She mentioned that she just went to the car and drove to her parents. At this point, they still didn't know the full extent of the situation, only that she and I had separated and it seemed serious. At 5:30 p.m. that day, I was having dinner with my son at home. My sister was out with friends, and we were simply spending time together. The deputy had relayed earlier events, and I took some satisfaction in knowing the consequences. The janitor being there was just blind luck. I was surprised Jenny hadn't been arrested for assaulting him, but hey, you can't have everything. Then a knock at the door interrupted our evening. Before me stood a lady about 5 feet 5 inches tall and enormously pregnant, barely able to stand straight. She asked for Jenny. I explained she no longer lived there and wouldn't be returning. Confirming I was her soon-to-be ex-husband, I informed her that I had served the divorce papers that day. She introduced herself as Wendy, the janitor's wife, pregnant with their 4th child. Despite my reluctance, I let her in to sit down. Wendy disclosed the earlier events, the firing, and the circumstances surrounding it. It made me feel nauseous. Who had I married? She also shared details about the house where my wife met the janitor. At that moment, I wished I could erase him from existence, not for my wife's sake, but for the sake of humanity. This guy was despicable. Again, more on the house later. After assuring me that she only wanted to talk to Jenny and reveal the truth, Wendy left. 1 hour later, Wendy approached my father-in-law, seeking to speak to my wife. Thinking she was a friend of Jenny's, he invited her in. When Jenny appeared, Wendy disclosed her identity and the truth about the janitor. Wendy and the janitor were still married, and she was 8 months pregnant with their 4th child. Jenny was upset, crying and repeatedly apologizing. However, the revelation took a darker turn. The janitor, along with another hospital colleague and a friend, had been playing a game, scoring how many married women they could seduce within days. Until my wife, the 3rd. Man was leading with 3. My wife became the janitor's 3rd conquest. Oh, and on the night he claimed to be with one of his kids, he engaged with a 4th woman according to Wendy. This 4th lady had been married for 25 years, and Wendy was informing her husband then it was their neighbor. The house served as a place rented for these encounters with married women. Wendy learned about this 2 hours after his termination. He returned home intoxicated and tearful, confessing everything in an attempt to reconcile. Wendy left with the kids and informed my wife that she was leaving him. She then squared up her shoulders, slapped my wife hard across the face, and called her a foolish cow. Jenny was stunned. Wendy told her she should be ashamed of tossing away her family, recounting how she had witnessed a loving man feeding his son alone because his wife was a foolish, selfish person without morals. Overwhelmed, my wife lost control, crying while Wendy walked away, got in the car, and left. My in-laws checked on her after the car drove off. She was essentially catatonic. They got her inside and considered taking her to the emergency room when she began speaking incoherently. My father-in-law thought she might be on speed. She expressed remorse and a determination to fix things. They eventually calmed her down and learned the whole story. My father-in-law was deeply hurt. He was and is a good man. He later said Jenny could see the shame and disappointment on his face. As for my mother-in-law, as usual, she blamed me. I'm not fond of her. In the aftermath, my father-in-law called me the next day and apologized the only time I ever suspected he had tears in his eyes. He shared what had happened and mentioned that Jenny had been in her room all day and night. I informed him about the appointment we had to meet on Sunday at 1 at the park. He said okay and hung up. I worked on Friday and attended school on Saturday. By day's end, I learned I had passed and would receive my degree. Bittersweet, but I had made it. My parents celebrated that night, with extended family coming over and cooking out. I have a great family. The next day, no one brought up Jenny. At the time, I hadn't heard from her. We were supposed to meet up at 1. I considered it a blessing, something I could use in a custody hearing if needed. Her father called. He mentioned Jenny was still not responding coherently, walking around in her bathrobe with a notebook in her hands, not bathing, and eating sparingly. He was worried and tired, afraid to sleep in case she hurt herself. He asked me to come see her, but I declined. I couldn't feel anything for her. I told him to get her some help, and that I would allow her to see our son when she could get herself together. I truly felt nothing for her. That first night, I had gone through my trial by fire and emerged stronger. More on that later. I wasn't going to care about this person ever again. I didn't hear from her or her family for 2 weeks. 2 weeks elapsed since I last spoke with my father-in-law. During that time, I quit my part-time job and actively sought a new one. I had plans to pursue my MBA but wanted to settle into a new job for a year or two. My son was asking about his mother, and I could only comfort him. At that point, the longer she went without reaching out to see him, the better for my chances of securing a good custody deal. I was at the PD when she called, asking to set up a time to meet and see our son. I inquired if she had pulled herself together enough not to scare him, and she replied affirmatively. I told her I would meet her at 9 a.m. at the park on Saturday and asked her to bring her dad. I didn't want to meet her alone. My mother went with me. Upon seeing her, I knew I had made the right decision to limit her contact to only 2 hours. She was a mess, significant weight loss, no makeup, and lacking the feminine smells I associated with her. I later learned her mother had bathed and dressed her. Jenny was not fully functional yet. Park meetings continued for approximately 3 weeks, and I extended them to 4 hours, including Sundays. While she appeared to improve each week, I remained concerned about her mental health, leading me to avoid letting our son stay with her overnight or see him alone. Eventually, my mother-in-law grew tired of this and hired an attorney to sue for custody. At this point, Jenny had not yet signed the divorce papers, but I was okay with that since I could petition for a divorce in 6 months. However, the custody suit angered me because she sought full custody, despite my prior willingness conveyed to her father to eventually work towards 50-50 custody. Her mother dismissed this and demanded full custody. In response, I requested full custody on the grounds of mental defect. I was ready for a legal battle, needing an outlet for my anger. This was it. On the day of the custody hearing, my lawyer informed me that her attorney had a request. Jenny wanted to speak with me privately. Initially, I declined, but they proposed doing so in the hallway outside the courtroom, visible to both attorneys yet with inaudible conversation. I reluctantly agreed. During our private conversation, she engaged in small talk, inquiring about our son's well-being and my school. I informed her that I had passed and that graduation was next week, which made her happy. When she asked to attend my graduation, I declined, stating that it was for family and friends and she was neither. This deeply hurt her, particularly since we had worked together for most of our time to achieve this goal. I further rejected her by emphasizing, "It's special to me. It didn't matter enough to you when you let someone use you like trash." My behavior became increasingly hostile as I wanted to inflict pain. She teared up, returned to her attorney, and the hearing commenced. During the hearing, I testified without any unusual revelations. However, my mother-in-law placed all the blame on me, accusing me of seeing someone, which allegedly drove my wife crazy. Although there was no proof of this, she cared little for the truth. She also claimed I had assaulted my wife by grabbing her and throwing her on the hood of the car on the night she left. Then it was Jenny's turn. While answering questions from her lawyer, she abruptly stopped and asked the judge if she could speak. Advised to confer with her attorney, she declined and proceeded. Here are my wife's words from her notebook. "I remember how sad I was after the hearing started. I listened to OP give his side of the story and how he had taken care of our boy all these weeks. I needed to make this right. I sat there listening to Mama, and I knew she was lying to protect me, but it was just another lie on top of a lie. I had enough. I had to fix this." Jenny then expressed her desire to apologize to my parents and her own parents. Looking at me, she acknowledged that I probably hated her more than anyone in the world at that moment. She accepted full responsibility for everything, hoping to salvage anything left of our relationship, even if it only meant that I could look at her without disgust. She informed the judge of her decision to withdraw her custody claim and would adhere to any custody arrangement I saw fit to give her. I conferred with my attorney, and we offered supervised 1-hour visits for 6 weeks, with our son staying with her every other weekend after that, if no issues arose. We adjourned. Looking back, I think that is when I saw a small ray of possibility. We would be nicer to each other, not reconcile, but at least cordial. The schedule worked well, and after the 3rd week, we began spending visitation time with just her, me, and our son, usually extending to 3 or 4 hours. Although I wasn't friendly, I genuinely enjoyed watching my son play with his mother, benefiting them both. The only negative incident occurred during the 5th visit when she hugged my right arm from behind while I was watching our son play. I freaked out, yelled at her to never touch me again. The next week, we acted as though nothing happened, and she kept her distance. One more month passed, and our discussions increasingly centered on day-to-day matters. I landed a new job with a higher salary, and she commenced nursing school. She started sharing with me that the janitor persistently called her and refused to leave her alone. Wanting to be transparent, she informed me in case I heard that she had asked him to back off. However, he still appeared at her parents' house one night, prompting her father to threaten intervention if he persisted. Indifferent to her romantic involvement, I expressed that I no longer cared about whom she slept with. She assured me she was not involved with anyone and wouldn't be until she was certain that our family could not be reunited, an outcome I asserted was unlikely. 6 months after our separation, I broached the topic of her signing the divorce papers, to which she refused, reminding me that her signature was unnecessary but would streamline the process. She proposed a meeting that night at our house for a discussion. If I still desired a divorce, she agreed to sign the papers that night. I consented, and she arrived with small black composition notebooks resembling bound books. She explained that she began jotting down thoughts the day after receiving the divorce papers, unsure why but finding it helpful, detailing everything she could recall about the events in as much detail as possible. She wanted me to read it, cautioning that it would be emotionally challenging. Despite my reluctance, she insisted, acknowledging the risk but feeling compelled to help me understand why she was attempting to salvage our marriage. Reluctantly, I read it. It proved to be a difficult experience, as the closeness details were not explicitly described but alluded to in general terms. What she said about me and our marriage to the janitor, however, was deeply impactful. The book chronicled her mental breakdown, initially presented in a jumble and unorganized manner but gradually improving each day. She began to analyze her actions, deeming it her therapy. One passage described an irrational conclusion she reached, believing it would rectify everything. According to her, she remembered she never climaxed with the janitor, concluding that if she didn't, it meant she did not enjoy it. Therefore, she believed she had done nothing wrong and I should take her back. This belief persisted until she discussed it with her dad, who uncomfortably clarified that it didn't work that way. Although reading the book didn't change my decision, it instilled a sense of fear in me. I remained concerned about her mental state until I read the content and the way she wrote. Unaware of how fragile her mind had become during those 2 weeks, I agreed to give it more time. This emboldened her to encourage me to sit down and compose a letter or something about what had happened. She believed it would provide her with a better understanding of how to assist me. Acknowledging my own emotional turmoil, I considered that it might help me move on and potentially lead to a healthier relationship down the road. What I referred to as her writing therapy evolved into scheduled meetings twice a week. Our initial assignment was to document our perception of the state of our marriage before D-Day. During these meetings, we exchanged letters, made notes, and posed questions in writing. The rules were straightforward: answer honestly, no yelling, and no refusal to answer any question. We commenced with an analysis of our pre-D-Day marriage, progressing through each subsequent day until the Sunday I spoke with her father. After that, we would reassess and proceed accordingly. I must admit, I behaved terribly during this period. While I answered questions honestly, there was one exception which I'll address later. I used the opportunity to humiliate her, making her repeatedly recount the negative things she said to the janitor about me. I compelled her to provide excruciating details about their carnal encounters, despite them being relatively vanilla compared to our pre-experiences together. It was genuinely hurtful. Initially, I believed I could handle it since I had no interest in reconciliation. However, hearing those details was tough. Looking back, it's astonishing how cruel I had become, but in my mind, it was justified at the time. After about a month of this process, I had to acknowledge that it helped me to some extent. She proposed moving back in and taking the next step, but I refused. Despite her pleading and a compelling argument, I stood my ground. I explained that even if I entertained the idea of reconciliation, I couldn't be close with her again. She accepted this condition, suggesting I could explore outside the marriage while she remained faithful. That wasn't my character, so I declined. After another month, I relented but imposed strict rules. These rules were non-negotiable and firmly established. First, she had to sleep in the spare room. Second, absolutely no physical contact was allowed. Third, she could keep her money in her checking account, but I managed her banking and provided checks for her bills, rent for the room, expenses, and spending money. This was due to her giving the janitor $300 from our savings account a week before D-Day. Moreover, I anticipated that she might decline to move in. Fourth, her mother was not permitted to enter my home until we decided to reconcile, as I was still upset with her. Fifth, all prior custody agreements would automatically be reinstated if reconciliation didn't happen. Sixth, if I found someone else, she had 1 week to move out. She agreed to these terms and moved in. It proved to be more challenging than I anticipated, as I no longer had the cooling down period between the times I saw her. She was there all the time, leading to frequent small fights and hurtful remarks from me. I wanted her out. Shortly after she moved back in, we initiated Thursday night fight night, a concept stemming from our writing sessions. Every Thursday night after the kid was asleep, we would discuss ongoing issues or arguments in the living room. These matters had to be resolved before bedtime and could not linger. This practice persists in a modified form today, simply involving a dinner check-in about any issues to address that night. The kids remained unaware of its origin or purpose. I continued to be difficult, bringing up her affair at every opportunity. She handled it with composure, never engaging in the conflict. At that point, I would acknowledge I was emotionally cruel to her. Nevertheless, she remained resilient, recognizing that we were meant to be together. Since she played a part in destroying our lives, she was committed to rebuilding them independently until I could see what she saw and join her. She was willing to give me the time I needed. 6 months after she moved back in, I experienced my own breakthrough. After a particularly challenging day filled with triggers, I locked myself in the bedroom, unable to endure it any longer. My wife came to the door, knocked, and softly said, "You need to talk. I'll be out here when you think you can." I heard her slide down the door, sit on the floor, and lean her back against the door. For an hour, she patiently waited, and it was almost midnight when I finally opened the door. She inquired if she could enter, and I declined, suggesting we go to her room. Once in her room, she sat on the bed, and I settled into a chair. It was then that I finally revealed what occurred after I asked her to leave the night I discovered the affair. Following her departure, I spent significant time in my son's room, silently watching him sleep. I retrieved the checkbook, bill ledger, and a copy of the life insurance policy from my desk, placing them conspicuously on the kitchen table. After a shower, I retrieved my .38 from the closet shelf, laid it on the bed, dressed, combed my hair, and sat on the bed, grappling with the taste of oil on the barrel. I distinctly recall becoming fixated on that taste, identical to the scent. The duration of my contemplation remains unclear. Subsequently, I unloaded the weapon, returned it, changed clothes, and went to bed. Regrettably, I believe such thoughts enter the minds of many betrayed spouses. I admitted to her that it was the only detail I had concealed during our recovery. For the first time, I allowed her to hug and kiss me on the forehead in a non-goodbye context. It marked the initial emotional touch I permitted her to have with me. Although I claimed to forgive her that night, I did not genuinely mean it until several months later. Nonetheless, uttering the words began to open the door for me. Following that, physical touch gradually increased, holding hands, farewell kisses, hugs, and so forth. These interactions became more commonplace in our relationship. While full togetherness did not occur, we were progressing in that direction. Eventually, almost a year after her return, we became close. This period seemed like our hysterical bonding phase. She continued journaling, and according to her, we were close times and days. Years later, during a conversation, she revealed that until the night we became close, she woke up every morning thinking it might be our last day together. She kept telling herself to endure just one more day. Recognizing these signs, she understood that I was reestablishing a connection. Today, we enjoy a strong marriage, both successful in our careers with 3 grown children. As far as we know, they are unaware of these past events. There are no plans to disclose, but we won't lie if they inquire. Both of us underwent significant changes. My wife emerged stronger and wiser, viewing this period as an unnecessary evil she caused but successfully overcame. Sometimes I believe she still imposes punishment on herself. As for me, this topic seldom surfaces in our discussions or arguments not for over 20 years. She is perceptive and often recognizes when I experience a trigger. Though infrequent, they still occur, perhaps once or twice a year. While brief, they sting. Typically, she grabs my hand and holds it or hugs me, saying I love you or simply expressing gratitude. I lost some positive aspects of myself. I tend to withhold my feelings, dealing with them privately while supporting her emotional needs. I've made it clear that I won't be her emotional crutch anymore. It is now her responsibility to communicate the issue and propose a plan for resolution, which I will assist in implementing. I love her, and I had to learn to love her again. It's different, more realistic, but intense nonetheless. As mentioned earlier, I believe I had to sacrifice a part of my goodness for her to grow into a better person. At this juncture in my life, I am content with that choice. I share this in the hope that it may benefit someone. While every situation is unique, this approach proved effective for us, and I'm grateful for that. I'm not advocating for reconciliation. I'm advocating for self-control. Focus on what you can change, not what you can't. Prioritize what benefits you in your specific circumstances. Be self-centered to some extent. then consider rebuilding a collective we in a marriage or relationship later. Look up the Serenity Prayer on Google. My opinion, no truer words have ever been written. Remember, you're hearing about the worst days of our lives in marriage during the process of surviving infidelity. Despite this tragedy, we've created many greater, happier memories that far outweigh it. I wish you all the best on this journey. With effort focused on yourself, you can emerge victorious on the other side of the pain. Update: I want to inform everyone that we are still married. Now we have grandchildren, and if you're aware, you know it's an entirely different kind of love. My wife is semi-retired, working as PRN, meaning as needed or when she wants to. I continue working full-time, but we managed to find ample time for travel. I can't recall the last time I had a trigger, perhaps about 3 years ago, and only because our oldest discovered my wife's affair through a vindictive relative leading a very lonely life. My wife handled it with grace and humility, and it impacted me in a way that I finally moved on completely. She apologized for the pain she caused, and we both emphasized that it was in the past. Any issues he had, we offered help but cautioned him that ultimately it was between us, falling under matters that were our business. Fortunately, it hasn't seemed to affect their relationship, even though she was understandably embarrassed. Update: 3 weeks ago, my wife Jenny passed away after a 6-month battle with colon cancer. She left us with all of us by her bedside in the home we constructed 4 years ago for our retirement. Her retirement, only 18 months in when she was diagnosed, was abruptly cut short. Describing the loss is beyond my capacity. It surpasses any pain I've encountered. Even the collective anguish experienced in this community as betrayed loved ones. Following our reconciliation, she spent the remaining years making amends for the pain she caused, and she succeeded in a remarkable manner. I feel her absence deeply, as do our children. However, I recognize that I am still here for a purpose. In her final days, Jenny wrote a letter to me. She entrusted our pastor to deliver it after the ceremony at the appropriate moment. I read the letter 3 days ago, and I'd like to share a passage from it for those of you who have read our story and found something positive. It underscores the importance for betrayed individuals to forgive. It also highlights that those who betray and genuinely feel remorse should endure long-term consequences for their actions. Here is the passage. I am currently experiencing a considerable amount of physical pain, as you are aware, but my faith provides me with a perspective on what lies ahead. The pain will eventually diminish. Certain pains have a tendency to turn one inward, and I've been introspective in recent weeks. At times, I believe I deserve this pain due to what I did to you, to us, many years ago. However, you consistently lift me, settle me in my chair, assist me with meals, bathe me, hold my hand, and play your guitar. As I immerse myself in memories, I recognize that this pain is a gift. It allows me to encounter the true essence of love in its purest form. Your genuine forgiveness for my past actions, your actions caring for me, reflect true love and forgiveness. I love you immensely. There is more to say, but I wanted to share this with our community and express gratitude for your presence in our lives, even if it's on the periphery. I love you as well.
Story 2.
Be prepared served as the Boy Scouts' motto. The Scouts' code differed, emphasizing qualities such as trustworthiness, loyalty, helpfulness, friendliness, courtesy, kindness, obedience, cheerfulness, thriftiness, bravery, cleanliness, and reverence, along with seemingly contradictory traits of naivety, stupidity, idiocy, and trust. Surprisingly, these aspects coexisted seamlessly. Nick had no other answers. Typically, he refrained from inspecting anything on his wife's iPhone, a practice she acknowledged. Consequently, she neglected extra security measures. Being a Boy Scout, Nick upheld honesty and avoided invading privacy. However, with his wife heading out of town soon, he sought her hotel's name, aiming to avert a potential disagreement arising from his forgetfulness, a recurring issue lately. Post their wedding 5 years ago, this impending trip marked their lengthiest separation. Nick contemplated a romantic gesture, like sending flowers, to express his love while she was in the romantic city of Paris. Yet, his plans were disrupted by the realization that Dwayne, not he, was the one she would be sharing this experience with. Entering his wife's phone code, their wedding date, Nick found himself perusing work-safe emails exchanged between Linda and Dwayne. Their discussions included a nighttime stroll down the Champs-Élysées and then a moonlit boat ride on the Seine. Almost as surprising as the affair itself was the fact that Nick's wife, Linda, and her lover, Dwayne, exchanged messages using their work email accounts. She should have known better. So should Dwayne. Like Nick, Linda was a lawyer. Dwayne worked as a paralegal at Linda's firm. All three, Nick, Linda, and Dwayne, had experienced enough document handling and major litigation. Huge teams of lawyers and paralegals read each of the hundreds of thousands of emails received or considered as part of document discovery. There was always a story about an affair by one or two idiots, and then the lawyers would try to figure out if the affair was relevant, and if so, how to limit damages. Nick didn't really pay attention to what Linda had told him about the trip and the name of the hotel where the team would be staying, because something funny was going on at that moment. Nick didn't know what it was, but instinct made his hair stand on end. 5 years as a lawyer listening to clients lie, and listening to lawyers carefully avoid lying by not telling everything, had made his listening skills sharp. And something was wrong when Linda initially told him about the trip, a very boring arbitration case that would keep them so busy they wouldn't even be able to enjoy the sights. She said it without looking at him at all, and a little too flippantly. She knew Paris was one of Nick's favorite cities, and they always talked about going together because Linda had never been there. Nick discovered her response to be peculiar, but the worst-case scenario had not even crossed his mind. Yet, the content of the email he was presently reading seemed like a direct stab into his heart. Dwayne had suggested the idea of letting go of the Boy Scout for them to spend more time together without worry. Linda expressed that she felt safe with him. Nick questioned her about deceiving him behind the Boy Scout's back, making him excited. Uncertain about what to do, Nick decided to print the email on the Wi-Fi printer in the basement, just in case. As a seasoned lawyer, his initial task was to preserve the evidence by printing the letter and placing it in his computer bag. Nick took a moment to think. He was certain about what he wanted to do. In his view, he had a win-win option: feign readiness to kiss her, then abruptly collide with a tree in the woods behind the house. Dwayne, on the other hand, would face less mercy before causing damage. Nick needed to think, and thinking was what defined him as a lawyer. He was paid to utilize his brain, not his muscles, and he had to think quickly because Linda had gone for a run and would return soon. Before he could delve into his thoughts, he had to complete his assignment and find a hotel, not to send flowers. He wasn't sure why he needed that information, but he sensed a purpose. La Clef Tourfell, near the Trocadero, across the river from the Eiffel Tower, a 5-minute walk from the International Chamber of Commerce, where Linda and Dwayne would be working on their arbitration case with the rest of the team. During the lovers' free time between hotel rendezvous, he had to conduct a quick computer search on Virginia's divorce laws, drawing from his bar exam days 5 years ago. It was always good to check. Infidelity was grounds for divorce, and could impact matters like alimony and property division. However, there were objections to the charge of infidelity, one being convenience. The defense was to discover the infidelity and then willingly resume coital relations and continue living together. Hence, he needed to leave the house promptly. Confrontation? Not yet. His plan was to unleash total shock and awe on her. With no uncertainties, he aimed to dominate the battlefield to end this marriage, even if it meant lying. It conflicted with Scout law, but this was war. After all, Churchill stated, "In war, truth is so valuable that it must always be accompanied by a bodyguard of lies." Nick's lies now served a more critical purpose. None of them were under oath anyway. He went up to the bedroom, swiftly packed, and placed the suitcases by the front door. Just as he gathered the necessary paperwork, bank and credit card statements, 401k and IRA accounts, car papers, paycheck statements, mortgage statements, and Linda's latest student loan balance, she returned from her run, and he heard her in the kitchen as he ascended from his basement office. Upon observing her drinking Gatorade, he decided to feign concern, appearing out of place. Despite her looking good with shoulder-length brown hair and a ponytail, he came to the realization that love was dead. He conveyed the news of going to Paris with a grim smile. Linda's face lost its color, and her blue eyes paled. In response to his announcement, she quickly regained composure, asking if it was Paris, Virginia. Nick explained that Sven had called, informing them about testifying in his insurance case and the need to prepare a witness. He mentioned the complications arising from losing a motion to compel, causing chaos in the court schedule. Nick anticipated being on the road for a few weeks, with the possibility of stopping by to do laundry from time to time. Linda, adopting a suitably concerned expression, remarked sympathetically, suggesting that maybe his firm was recruiting. Nick expressed a preference for her version of Paris. Linda, noticing worry returning to his face, then smirked, teasing him to send her a resume, hinting at the possibility of considering him for a job. It was a playful jab, considering Linda's law school ranked higher academically than Nick's. Perhaps feeling guilty, she gestured as if about to hug him, but Nick turned and headed down to his office before she could close the gap. The visions of him punching her in the face resurfaced, and he wasn't sure he could keep them under control. Rising, Linda inquired about his dinner preferences. He informed her that he couldn't stay and would grab something on the road, mentioning Sven's excitement and eagerness for him to hit the road immediately. He spoke while walking through the kitchen, and Linda followed him to the door, appearing a bit worried as he took the suitcases and headed for the exit. For a goodbye kiss, she pressed her lips together, expressing regret that she might have a cold, citing a sore throat in the afternoon. Linda followed him to the car as he loaded it up. He answered her question about his return, stating that it probably wouldn't be until Friday at the earliest. After Paris, they were heading to Roanoke, and the following week, they had to go to Baltimore. Noticing a change in Linda's demeanor, he thought she might be growing more paranoid. He observed her staring off into the distance, as if calculating the unexpected possibilities his absence would open up. He waved goodbye and drove away from the driveway, hoping she'd assume he was busy with work and annoyed at being called in on a Saturday. His acting skills weren't capable of much more than that right now, but he suspected she was already planning to ask Dwayne out. Nick drove until he reached the nearest shopping center with a coffee shop. Like most lawyers, he thought better on paper. Sipping his coffee, he began making a list of cases. He paused for a moment to realize that he had never once thought about reconciliation. It wasn't even an option. Retribution would be inevitable. The only question was the degree. He was interrupted by the phone ringing, and upon not recognizing the number, he impatiently answered. The caller introduced himself as Sam Granger, explaining that he obtained the number from old real estate records. Granger quickly got to the point, stating that he was in the business of buying old houses to tear them down and build McMansions. He acknowledged the general disapproval of his work, but noted that people tended to dislike him less when presented with a check. Nick didn't have much time to react, only thinking about how the house wasn't old but cozy. He wondered why Granger was talking about tearing it down. However, his rational mind took over. Granger expressed his interest in buying Nick's house to tear it down, mentioning that he couldn't guarantee the timing of new construction, especially with county permits. He clarified that his profits came from renting out the new properties quickly. Despite Nick's initial surprise and confusion, he could hardly contain a Grinch-like smile at the prospect of a potentially good offer, especially if he and his wife were motivated to sell. Linda had picked out a house shortly before their wedding. It was an old ranch house, but with a nice yard that looked right out onto a patch of woods with a creek running through it. It was close to major highways, but was quite secluded and peaceful. What finally won her over was the treehouse in the yard across from the bedroom window. She appreciated that the house was suitable for children. Nick, on the other hand, liked the price and the convenient location, being only 20 minutes from a major metro parking lot. The prospect of a 30-minute train ride to work seemed like a reasonable option for the neighborhood. Nick addressed Mr. Granger, expressing that he would be occupied with work for the next few days, making it challenging to ensure access to the property. Granger insisted on being called Sam and reassured Nick that he didn't need to see the inside, emphasizing that it was a demolition job and he had already assessed it from the outside. Nick agreed to meet on Sunday morning, informing Sam that he would likely handle the deal closing himself by executing a power of attorney for his busy wife. Sam had no issue with this arrangement and offered to provide the necessary form. Nick noted the address and began outlining a plan. Reflecting on Linda's reliance on her Boy Scout, he pondered the irony that Lord Baden-Powell, the founder of the boys' movement, had drawn inspiration from military scouts, emphasizing skills such as stealth, cunning, and self-reliance. Considering an ambush strategy, he knocked over his empty coffee cup and went to his car for privacy. Nick dialed a number on his cell phone and then another, addressing the person who answered as Frank. He urgently requested a favor, needing it immediately. Frank Barry was a private investigator during his 5 years as a corporate lawyer. Nick made it a habit to assist poor people with their legal problems pro bono. This aligned with his ideas of public service. Additionally, he received a per-hour fee from his firm for doing so, and real courtroom experience, something his day job usually didn't provide. One of his law school classmates recommended Frank to assist with a nasty divorce case in which a stepfather was coitally abusing his stepdaughter. Frank's evidence allowed him to apprehend a boyfriend when the sluggish police response failed, and thanks to that evidence, the divorce case was resolved promptly. Frank listened attentively as Nick explained what he had learned. He inquired if Nick believed his wife would invite the other person into her bed that night and commented on her perceived brazenness and arrogance, highlighting her academic achievements. Frank expressed his determination to handle the situation himself and conveyed gratitude to Nick, mentioning the positive publicity the Rivera divorce case had brought him. Nick acknowledged Frank's words, expressing appreciation. He then informed Frank about a house in the backyard that might be useful for his purposes. Nick described how it opened right into the bedroom, where Linda liked to practice martial arts with the curtains open. He shared that there was a way to access it by going through the woods and jumping over the creek after dark with no fences or dogs. Nick provided details about a service road on the other side where one could park. Expressing his thanks, Nick suggested placing a camera outside aimed at the front of the house to monitor the comings and goings. Nick and Frank discussed using Harry for a divorce, with Nick confirming that he indeed wanted a divorce. Frank acknowledged Nick's decision and mentioned being familiar with how Harry preferred to have the affidavit and report done. He expressed confidence that they would find out the truth soon. After the conversation with Frank, Nick reached out to Harry. Harry initially thought it was about the law school reunion, but quickly realized it was something else. Nick clarified that he wanted to hire Harry because Linda was cheating, and he wanted to take legal action. After bringing Harry up to speed on the situation, Harry suggested that Nick come back the next day. Despite it being Sunday, Harry had some paperwork to deal with at the office and planned to stop by. He proposed starting the process and acknowledged that Nick seemed to have already addressed the issue of avoiding infidelity. Nick informed Frank that Harry was dealing with clear and convincing evidence, highlighting the challenge of the financial settlement, as Linda, being a lawyer at a large firm, had the resources to prolong the case with the support of her colleagues. Despite this, Nick assured Frank that he would handle the situation and believed they could settle it amicably. In the next conversation, Nick spoke with Harry, expressing the intention to settle the matter civilly rather than seeking vengeance. Harry acknowledged Nick's approach and agreed to see what he could come up with. Nick's final call was to Maggie, and the initial silence was palpable. Nick explained that he needed her help regarding Linda's infidelity. He apologized for past mistakes, acknowledging their affair and letting Linda cut Maggie out of his life. Despite Nick's emotional plea, he left Maggie to process his request. Eventually, she agreed to help, expressing gratitude for Nick's ability to make her laugh. She even teased him about meeting her new partner and proposed a dinner date when the dust settled. He needed somewhere to hide out for a while and make a plan of action. So, he found an extended stay hotel outside the Beltway in Fairfax, far enough away from the usual places he and Linda frequented that he wouldn't be spotted, settled in, and went to get some food. He wasn't particularly hungry, but he knew he needed something in his stomach to digest the drinks he was about to drink. The restaurant, called El Mariachi, was across the street from the hotel. It would be enough because the free Joels and cheese would just make him sick. As the hostess sat him down in a booth, he saw the bartender looking at him. He seemed vaguely familiar, but Nick put the thought out of his mind. He had enough to worry about at the moment. To see pupusas on the menu meant that the restaurant was a Central American establishment pretending to be Mexican. Most Americans didn't know the difference. Along with his meal, he ordered some cheap tequila. He knew the next day's hangover would be brutal, but he considered the pain part of the rite of passage. The waitress returned with a bottle of excellent top-shelf tequila and a highball glass. When Nick looked up at the waitress, she merely pointed to the bartender, who saluted him. Nick accepted the greeting and poured himself a generous portion as the bartender went back to serving other customers. It took a moment, but Nick remembered who he was. He remembered that the bartender was one of the people who had attended Rivera's divorce hearings and the criminal trials Nick had attended. He always sat in the last row by himself. No one ever sat next to him. Once his client, Sonia's daughter, hugged him, but when Nick asked Sonia who it was, she remained silent and said he was just a family friend. Nick ate in silence, making notes in his notebook and drinking tequila. When the waitress cleared away the dirty plates, he went to the break room. He felt like everything around him was moving, like on a ship. When he walked, he needed to lean against the wall while he went about his business. Then he went back to the booth, trying to keep steady, and found the bartender sitting in his booth on the opposite bench. The person addressed as Senor Nick warmly greeted him, expressing gratitude for Nick's assistance in helping his cousin end a problematic marriage. Nick attempted to downplay his role, but the bartender persisted, sharing that the cousin's ex-husband had suffered severe smackings in prison, resulting in the belief that he might never walk or eat solid food again. The bartender disclosed this information with a slight smile, and Nick, feeling a chill, remarked that he hadn't heard about it. The bartender casually dismissed it as yesterday's news. Nick, sitting down, tried to shift the focus and asked about the bartender's curiosity regarding his presence alone at El Mariachi's on a Saturday night. The bartender inquired about Nick's wife, describing her as beautiful. Nick locked eyes with the bartender, who maintained a smile. It wasn't mocking, but rather knowing. Nick couldn't fathom why the man posed such a peculiar question. How did the bartender even discern Nick's marital status? Then, Nick recalled Linda surprising him at a hearing and kissing him. The bartender must have lingered in the courtroom afterward. "We had some problems with her," Nick admitted. He saw no reason to deceive or withhold information, such as her involvement with someone else. The familiar smile reappeared, rendering Nick momentarily speechless. The bartender pointed out that keeping secrets involved not writing them down and leaving the paper in plain sight, gesturing towards Nick's notebook, which contained elements related to infidelity, a sketch of Dwayne with a knife, Linda's name circled with a slash, and a to-do list mentioning "burn that pig." Nick acknowledged the lapse in operational security, but noted that he hadn't disclosed any client secrets. The bartender advised Nick to consider what he truly desired aside from money and suggested revenge as an option. Nick didn't hesitate, expressing a violent desire to physically damage Linda. The bartender's smile widened, and he chuckled, cautioning Nick about the legal consequences of such retaliation. He emphasized that people who act violently often end up in jail, a situation Nick would likely want to avoid unless visiting clients. Acknowledging Nick's irrational thoughts, the bartender sympathetically suggested that he might be of assistance. He referenced Nick's past help to his cousin, acknowledging that she could have asked him for help, but for various reasons, she refused. Nick stepped in and resolved her issue, earning the bartender's gratitude. Nick tried to interject. Sure, he had Frank gather the evidence, but he had the police handle the investigation. It didn't hurt that Nick asked one of the partners in his firm, a former assistant United States attorney from the area, to have a quiet chat with the Commonwealth's attorney to ensure the criminal case was handled properly. Nick accompanied his client just to guarantee the prosecutors treated her with the respect she deserved. The bartender dismissed Nick's protests, expressing gratitude for his assistance to forgotten people like his cousin. He emphasized being indebted to Nick on behalf of his family and offered to repay his debts by providing assistance. Nick, unsure of the bartender's identity, asked for his name, and the bartender revealed that some people referred to him as El Diablo, or the Devil, though friends called him Jose Garcia. Nick jokingly asked if he had to sell his soul to get a favor, and El Diablo responded with a smile, calling it professional courtesy, and playfully noting that lawyers have no souls. El Diablo then requested Nick's address, his wife's name, and details about her daily routine. In response, Nick inquired about El Diablo's plan, suggesting that he stay blissfully ignorant and report on his movements over the next few months. He advised El Diablo to get a cell phone for communication, leave a number at the bar, and refrain from returning to El Mariachi's for the best outcome. Nick shared details with El Diablo about hiring a private investigator, his plan to remain at home until Linda's departure for France, and provided information about Linda's travel plans. El Diablo, aware of the Paris hotel location without disclosing how he knew, posed a question to Nick. He inquired about the possibility of reconciliation, forgiveness, or mercy, emphasizing the importance of resolving any doubts. The smile on El Diablo's face gave way to a serious expression as he awaited Nick's response. Nick, maintaining eye contact, took a deep breath and expressed his simple values of trust and loyalty. He admitted that his marriage lacked these values, with Linda triggering a transformation in his feelings from love to hate. Although he expected indifference to develop with time, that moment had not yet arrived. El Diablo, after hearing Nick's sentiments, reassured him that there was no chance for reconciliation. He concluded the conversation by telling Nick not to worry about a thing. The waitress brought the bill, and El Diablo dismissed her, letting Nick tip generously. He also allowed Nick to take a bottle of tequila, but advised him to take his time, needing sharpness for the upcoming battle. Surprisingly, waking up without much of a hangover on Sunday morning, Nick arrived at Harry's law office at 10 a.m., where he found Frank already present. Apologizing, Frank informed Nick that Linda was engaging in lovemaking activities with another man in his bed. Despite receiving a video copy, Nick was cautioned by Harry against watching it. Harry intervened, advising Nick against any reckless actions. Nick, assuring Harry, mentioned that he followed Harry's earlier suggestion to climb into the treehouse, obtaining clear shots of their faces and evidence of their physical interactions. He described the situation as merely a physical phenomenon, with the two hardly engaging in conversation, just having fun like rabbits. Nick wasn't sure if this revelation would alter their plans. Harry, responding negatively, inquired about the details. Nick spared him the specifics, but mentioned the high stamina of both individuals involved. Harry expressed his gratitude, albeit with a tinge of regret. Nick, in turn, apologized for sharing the information. Harry proceeded to reveal that Linda personally attended Nick's party last year, and they identified the man involved as Dwayne Martin, a colleague of hers. Although they couldn't determine the duration of their affair, they had clear and convincing evidence, including camera footage of their comings and goings. Harry assured Nick that he would email a link to the live feed on their secure server and mentioned that he would draft a report and supporting affidavit. Harry apologized once again, acknowledging Nick as a friend. After shaking hands with Harry and Nick, Frank left the office. Harry then inquired about Nick's plans, and Nick expressed the intention to file for divorce based on grounds of infidelity without directly filing against Linda. Harry looked at Nick without displaying any particular emotion. Nick assured Harry that he didn't want him to do anything reckless and believed the process would go more smoothly than expected. Harry grimaced at the suggestion. Nick continued, advising Harry to file the divorce case on Monday afternoon, just before the clerk's office closed. He requested Harry to inform him of the case number, assuring that he would handle the rest. Nick reminded Harry that he didn't practice criminal law well and wouldn't be able to assist if Nick encountered legal trouble. "You'll be pleasantly surprised," Nick declared as he exited. His next destination was a meeting with Sam Granger, proving highly productive. Nick discovered they could sell the house for over $100 of the mortgage, without a real estate agent's commission. Linda would be delighted. Nick pledged to have the necessary paperwork ready for a swift deal closure. Exiting Sam's office, Nick checked his phone. No messages or calls. She must still be enjoying time with Dwayne. Nick took the chance to urgently request 2 weeks of vacation, or he would quit, leaving his boss, Sven, in a panic. Luckily, Sven granted the request, given a temporary lull in business. With the groundwork laid, Nick returned to the hotel to focus on the real work. By Monday evening, he was prepared. Throughout Sunday night and Monday, Linda left unanswered voicemails. Nick conserved his energy for Tuesday morning. Thanks to Frank's front-facing camera, Nick knew Dwayne spent Monday night there, likely leaving for work around 8 a.m. Linda would depart around 8:30 a.m. So, at 7 a.m., Nick walked in yelling, "Honey, I'm home." Upon hearing brisk footsteps upstairs, Nick observed Linda, who appeared disheveled and shocked as she descended in her robe. Linda greeted him with attempted cheerfulness, expressing surprise and panic. Nick, maintaining a cheerful tone, apologized for not returning her calls, attributing it to the demands of being on the road. Disregarding the wine glasses, he headed to the dining room, and Linda, unsure of how to prevent him from reaching Dwayne, stood in the doorway. A knock on the door caught Linda off guard, and Nick asked her to answer it. As he spread papers on the table, Linda opened the door, expecting a bailiff with divorce papers. Instead, Maggie entered and greeted with a simple, "Hi." Linda watched curiously as Maggie unpacked her briefcase at the dining table. Nick, feigning sincerity, apologized to Linda, expressing the need for a renewed power of attorney due to potential financial or medical issues during their travels. He also mentioned an offer to refinance his mortgage and apologized for the short notice. Linda, after some initial tension, inquired about Maggie. Nick introduced her as Maggie, and Linda visibly relaxed. Despite having a lover hidden upstairs, she felt events weren't entirely out of control. With a smirk, Linda referred to Nick as her Boy Scout, emphasizing his readiness and claiming it was just the way she was, though her eyes remained wary. Handing Linda a pen, Nick began rearranging papers in front of her, explaining that the check marks with arrows indicated where she needed to sign. Linda, expressing trust, responded with a wide smile and promptly signed all the papers in front of her. He hoped that was the case because otherwise he wasn't going to get anywhere. But he who dares wins, as they say. While Linda signed each document, Nick organized them and handed them to Maggie, who lined them up and notarized them. "Mrs. Buford, do you have a photo ID?" asked Maggie. Linda got up from the table to find her purse. Maggie and Nick exchanged glances, but both had to quickly lower their eyes to the table to keep from laughing. Linda brought her driver's license to the table. Maggie took a picture of it with her phone and wrote the information in her notary journal. Linda offered coffee, but both Nick and Maggie declined. While Maggie recorded the notarized documents in her journal, and Nick sorted everything into different folders, Linda looked up, expecting Nick to attempt something and calculating her next move. Maggie left, stowing away all the tools, and smiled at Nick when Linda wasn't looking. Nick gave Linda a break, stating that he needed to have a teleconference and would go down to his basement office to do so. Linda's shoulders relaxed. For now, she would have time to escort Dwayne out the door and erase any trace of his presence before Nick reappeared from his man cave. Nick went downstairs to give her the illusion that she was still fooling him. He pretended not to hear Dwayne's heavy footsteps descending the stairs, or the sound of the garage door opening so Dwayne's car could pull out. But upon hearing the sound of the shower running in the master bath, Nick gathered everything he had, walked out the basement door, and left in his car without a word to his loving wife. 2 hours later, after a hearty breakfast at the diner, Nick was in Harry's office. Harry appeared shocked as Nick explained that he had managed to get the wife to sign a form, CC 1406, agreeing to the service of the divorce petition on her and waiving service of court notices and notices of any future proceedings. Harry examined the properly notarized form that Nick presented, and Nick confirmed that it was indeed signed. Harry sought clarification, asking if Nick had also persuaded his wife, an experienced attorney, to sign a property division agreement. This agreement included provisions such as giving Nick all the proceeds from the sale of their house and its contents, the cars, and Linda's jewelry. Additionally, it granted Nick full discretion over the disposition of Linda's personal belongings and allowed both of them to walk away with their respective retirement accounts, with no alimony in Linda's favor. Nick affirmed these details, emphasizing that Linda, who earned more money than him, willingly agreed to leave the marriage with approximately $125,000 in retirement contributions and about $200,000 in undergraduate and law school debt, according to the documents. Harry, seemingly skeptical, remarked that Linda had a generous nature. Harry then turned his attention to the affidavit Nick claimed Linda signed, admitting to cheating and acknowledging the presence of her lover in the marital bedroom at the time of signing. Nick confirmed these details and referenced an email correspondence where Linda discussed staying with her lover because he aroused her. Nick, showing no visible emotion, asserted that the documents spoke for themselves. Harry glanced at the papers, looked up at Nick, and started to smile but suppressed it, twisting in his chair. He expressed frustration, mentioning his intention to file all the presented documents. Harry, feeling embarrassed, acknowledged Nick as a respected member of the bar and a friend from law school. He admitted being unaware that Nick was fabricating the situation and stated that everything appeared fine to him. Harry, addressing the court, suggested disbarment for Nick, emphasizing the violation of trust by his client. Nick, understanding the situation, inquired about the notary's potential role as a witness if needed. Harry confirmed that the notary could testify that Linda signed the documents and might mention seeing her scrutinize them. However, Harry refrained from providing an opinion on Linda's understanding of the document contents. Nick agreed to the plan, and Harry mentioned that he would file all the documents, including Frank's affidavit and report, which contained attached photos and a DVD. Harry intended to keep it out of the electronic file temporarily to prevent it from making the news. Nick emphasized the importance of keeping things quiet, considering Linda's impending departure for Paris in a little over 2 weeks. He asked if Harry knew anyone at the county courthouse. Harry mentioned Seth, a day student from the year after them, currently clerking at the county courthouse to build up his resume. Harry believed Seth might be able to expedite the process, but he cautioned that if the judge wanted live testimony, the entire plan could collapse, and Linda would need to make a decision. Nick informed Harry that Linda did not want to contest the case on fraud once she understood the situation. He mentioned that if things took a negative turn at that stage, he might have to let go of Harry's services, to which Harry agreed. Nick expressed a desire to hear the full story someday, but conveyed his reluctance to discuss it at the moment. Over the next 2 weeks, Nick successfully maintained a distance from Linda. He sent her text messages at off hours, letting her know how busy he was, but he answered her calls the rest of the time. Over time, she began to call less frequently. "You scared the hell out of her," Frank told him at the end of the week. "Judging from the videotape, Dwayne hasn't been in the house once since you showed up and surprised them Tuesday morning. I can't tell if they're meeting at his place during the week or having fun with each other at the office, but they're not doing it in the house. I'll tell you if anything changes." The only thing that had changed was that Nick had quietly returned to the house when he found out Linda was gone and had taken the financial papers he thought he might need. He also signed a contract to sell the house to Sam Granger. The transaction was to take place during Linda's first week in France. The rest of the time, Nick went to the gym, did some leisure reading, and pondered how he had gotten to the point where he was 30 years old with his life in such disarray. He told Sven that he needed a few more weeks off, and Sven reluctantly agreed. "She's having fun with him at the house again," Frank said Saturday, a week before Linda was scheduled to leave for Paris. "Thanks for the heads up," Nick replied. He didn't care, but he knew that once he got rid of the house, he'd rather burn the sheets than sell them. By this time, Nick had watched the video that Frank had given him the first time he realized his attraction. Dwayne was a couple of years younger, and as Frank's investigation had revealed, the guy was a gym rat, constantly pulling himself up in front of the mirror after weight training. Otherwise, he was unremarkable in comparison. Nick was in reasonable shape, but didn't boast a tight belly. Linda seemed to be seeking arm candy, a trait Nick could do without. Before he knew it, Linda embarked on her eagerly anticipated trip to Paris. A member of Frank's team followed her to the airport, ensuring her departure to Europe. Upon receiving the news, Nick went to the house, piled all of Linda's clothes in the living room, and packed up his belongings. The next day, movers arrived, packing Linda's items separately and sending them to storage. They also packed Nick's things and moved them to the apartment he found with Sam Granger's help. Nick easily sold the furniture thanks to Sam's reselling skills. Once the house was empty, Nick did a final walkthrough before taking one last action. He carefully collected wedding photos, the album, and Linda's wedding dress. He brought them to the fire pit under the treehouse on the patio, placed them atop embers, added lighter fluid to the dress, and lit a match. As everything burned, Nick was pleased with the level of detail captured in the video, even discerning details in each photo as it joined the flames. A day later, Nick closed the sale of the marital home, using Linda's power of attorney to sign on her behalf, a move she should have scrutinized. With a separate financial power of attorney, Nick deposited the house sale profit into his personal account, certifying it on behalf of his wife as her attorney in fact, and closed the joint accounts 3 days later. Still, in the initial week of Linda's French trip, a construction crew razed the house. Days later, they cleared the debris, starting preparations for the site. Unfortunately, the tree with the treehouse had to be removed for a planned gazebo. However, construction halted once only an empty square of land remained, due to issues in the permitting process. Nick and his law school friend at the county permit office believed the problem would resolve upon Linda's return, with proper forms submitted and approved. Throughout this period, Nick ignored all of Linda's attempts to contact him, not responding to calls, emails, or voicemails. El Diablo, using the landline, informed Nick that Linda and Dwayne appeared stressed and didn't look their best, suspecting something was amiss. Nick asked how El Diablo knew, to which he simply claimed to have connections everywhere, even in Europe. El Diablo inquired if Nick wanted Linda's wedding and engagement rings, and upon Nick's refusal, asked if someone else could acquire them. Nick agreed. 2 days before Linda's return from Paris, Nick visited Harry's office, receiving an unexpectedly swift divorce decree. Seth, tight-lipped, facilitated the process, and Nick opted not to inquire further, congratulating himself on his newfound single status. Harry provided a copy to send to Nick's ex-wife, expecting her delight. As Nick was getting into his car outside Harry's office, his phone rang. Receiving a call from an unfamiliar number, Nick recognized El Diablo's voice as soon as he answered. El Diablo advised Nick to take a vacation immediately, suggesting he go to a place with a lot of people who know him and can confirm his presence. El Diablo ended the call abruptly. Nick, understanding the urgency, realized he hadn't seen his college friends in New York for a while. Luckily, they had free schedules in the next few days. That afternoon, he hopped on Amtrak, attended shows, explored museums, and shared meals with friends, most of which he paid for with a credit card. Nick also tipped generously at the hotel to ensure the staff knew who he was. During his stay, he express mailed a DVD copy of him burning Linda's wedding dress and album to Linda's parents' home. Late one Sunday night, while savoring coffee and cake at Little Italy in Manhattan, Nick received a call from his father-in-law. His father-in-law informed him that Linda was in the hospital and going through a difficult time. Nick inquired about the reason behind her condition. His father-in-law explained that Linda had returned from a business trip on Friday and, along with a colleague, had been kidnapped at the airport. They were medicated and only managed to escape that morning. Unfortunately, Linda's colleague had been severely smackened. Nick could sense the emotional strain in his father-in-law's voice. Once upon a time, Nick might have felt sympathy. However, he asked about Linda's condition. The father-in-law explained that when Linda woke up, she found herself covered in tattoos with derogatory inscriptions, labeling her as a fancy woman and a strumpet. Soon after awakening and realizing this, an individual wearing a mask entered and physically assaulted her, breaking her nose and causing 2 black eyes. Nick couldn't help but be impressed by the severity of the situation. Really, it was the cherry on top of the ice cream. He would have been happy if Linda had realized that he had betrayed her in court, just as she had betrayed him in marriage. But this was just a rainbow pleasure of joy. It would be worth an immortal soul if he could give it away. Expressing his condolences, Nick acknowledged that he was currently out of town and inquired about what his father-in-law would like him to do. Detecting surprise on the other end, his father-in-law emphasized that Linda was Nick's wife. Nick, without much emotion, clarified that they were divorced, and the order was issued the previous week due to Linda's infidelity with the man she was traveling with. When his father-in-law seemed confused, Nick coldly mentioned having a video of the infidelity and offered to send a copy. The revelation left his father-in-law in stunned silence. Nick, displaying a lack of empathy, stated that Linda was no longer his problem, and his father-in-law would need to take care of her. His father-in-law, expressing frustration, accused Nick of causing the situation. Nick, unapologetic, explained that he had been in New York celebrating his divorce since Wednesday. He acknowledged the father-in-law's upset state and hoped for Linda's recovery, but conveyed that they had nothing more to discuss. Nick then ended the call. It occurred to Nick at that moment that the stress of city life had been too much lately. He sent Sven an email saying that Sven and the firm could go to hell, respectfully, after all. A quick internet search revealed that there was an REI store in Soho, and Nick got himself some new hiking and camping gear. Linda had never liked camping, so this was a chance to reconnect with her. Scouting past the hotel was very accommodating, and agreed to leave his luggage for a while for a reasonable fee. and Nick was on his way to the Adirondack Mountains to commune with nature until things calmed down. Luckily, he had his passport with him in case he had time to travel to Canada, and it turned out he did have time. For the next 8 weeks, he kept his phone turned off. Initially, he assumed some disturbed woman had taken possession of his ex-wife's phone, given the multitude of messages, including frantic screams and cries. He listened to just a couple and deleted the rest. There were numerous crazy emails, too. Her account must have been hacked. Reading through all of this seemed impossible. He hoped the troubled woman responsible would find the help she desperately needed. After 8 weeks, Nick, Frank, and Harry gathered for a drink. Harry clarified that he had terminated their ties with the attorney right after serving Nick the divorce decree, a piece of information Nick admitted to not having checked yet. As they settled at the table, Frank described the aftermath as a serious situation, likening it to a typhoon of destruction. Harry, with a sense of dark humor, found amusement in the widespread chaos. Frank began recounting the events, detailing how Linda, accompanied by her parents, had a meltdown upon seeing the vacant lot where their house once stood. Her emotional breakdown escalated as construction workers arrived, and her tattooed face became a source of laughter among them. Despite her visible injuries and the duct tape on her broken nose, the offensive tattoos on her face, neck, and arms were prominent. Harry took over the narrative, indicating that the work on her face was particularly well done, making the text highly visible on camera. The derogatory phrases included fancy woman, puta, and explicit statements about her preferences. In the afternoon, Linda, along with a couple of lawyers from prominent firms, arrived at Frank's office without an appointment. Frank deliberately made them wait for 15 minutes, ensuring that his loaded Glock was in his desk for safety. Grateful for Virginia's firearm laws, Frank eventually faced their anger, enduring discussions about emergency motions, bar complaints, and contempt proceedings. Despite the tension, Frank couldn't help but be aware of the visible ink on his face, done in red and blue for maximum visibility. When he finally shifted his attention, Frank questioned the nature of their problem and challenged them to identify any false statements in the documents. The lawyers hesitated and looked at each other. Frank then asked if the dispute revolved around Linda's infidelity, to which they all affirmed. Taking control of the situation, Frank played the videotape that had been recording while they waited. The footage clearly showed Linda engaging in lovemaking activities with someone other than her husband in the marital bed. The lawyers, caught off guard and seemingly unfamiliar with the case details, exchanged confused glances. Linda began shouting about not having a chance to explain, claiming that she never agreed to let Nick sell the house and accused him of burning her personal belongings, including her wedding dress, pictures, and album. Frank presented copies of powers of attorney, including one for the house sale, and the property settlement agreement, which granted Nick authority over her personal items. He pointed out that Linda was fortunate to still have her clothes. When Frank questioned if she contested her signature on the documents, Linda admitted to it, but insisted she hadn't agreed to the contents. Frank pressed further, asking if her defense rested on not reading what she signed, and warned her about the potential consequences during cross-examination in court. Linda fell silent, and when Frank referred to the accurate affidavit she signed, admitting her lover's presence during the signing, she lost consciousness. Despite attempts to revive her, she refused to go to the hospital. Later, she complained about tattoos and her boyfriend being assaulted, to which Frank clarified that Nick was out of town and likely had no involvement. Dwayne's altercation may have been with another angered party, thinking Linda was defending him. Frank directed them to the Fairfax Police Department for criminal matters. The drama continued as they discussed filing a motion for reconsideration. Frank received an anonymous email with links to videotapes of Linda and Dwayne in Nick's bed during their escapades in front of Paris, warning of widespread distribution if she persisted. Frank informed Nick about this, stating that these were friends Nick had assisted and who pledged to protect him by activating the send button if Linda persisted. Following their departure, Frank heard nothing more from them. Nothing happened at the courthouse, and Frank suggested that they might have involved the police, who initially sought copies of the videotape and report, but lost interest later. Linda and Dwayne couldn't explain the events, remembering only entering a cab at the airport, with the next memory being in the hospital. Linda woke up in a shabby hotel, endured a punch to the face, and found her way to the hospital, discovering that room charges, room service, and minibar expenses were billed to her credit card. This time, Nick disclosed that the hotel manager, along with New York police officers, had verified his stay, contacting his New York friends who affirmed his active schedule in the city. Harry shared street talk that suggested Nick's ex was hiding in her parents' basement, undergoing an expensive laser tattoo removal due to her extensive coverage. Nick expressed regret, prompting a glance from Harry and a restrained chuckle from Frank. Regarding Meat Eater, Harry reported he suffered severe injuries, anticipating substantial future physical therapy with head damage and difficulty securing another paralegal job. Both were let go by their firm due to relationship breakdown during the trip, adversely affecting the arbitration with missed details, unprepared exhibits, and issues with lost witness notes. The client expressed dissatisfaction, leading the firm to make sacrifices to retain the client for future work. Frank praised Nick, hinting at a future revelation of how he accomplished it. Nick innocently asked, "Managed what? I'm a Boy Scout." Maggie, waiting in the car, expressed her willingness to vouch for watching Linda review each document before signing, but couldn't estimate the time spent. Nick suggested discussing over dinner and treating Maggie for helping him gain his freedom. Maggie clarified, dispelling the notion of a boyfriend, prompting Nick's surprised reaction. She directed him to take her home, ready for a lengthy apology. Nick agreed with a smile, but mentioned a quick stop at the post office to send a card to a friend, featuring a Boy Scout emblem, asking if she felt safe at the moment.
Story 3. Hello everyone, and welcome to Fresh Master Channel. Today, we are going to have some story from Reddit. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment down below. These simple clips mean a lot to the future of this channel.
Brad had never been the type to dwell on chance encounters, yet one particular moment in his past seemed to stick with him more than he expected. In his first year of college, an unexpected delay in registration forced him into an elective class he never intended to take: art appreciation. Surrounded by students with brightly colored hair, heavy paint stains on their clothes, and an enthusiasm for abstract thought that bewildered him, he was entirely out of place. Despite his disinterest, he made a few acquaintances in that course, one of whom was a quiet yet sharp-witted girl named Kathleen Kinnison. She was a fixture in the art department, known for her brutally honest critiques and her uncanny ability to capture raw emotion on canvas. Kathleen often spoke of her closest friend, a girl named Ramona, who, as she described, had the soul of an artist, but the confidence of a shadow. At the time, Brad had no reason to remember that name. A year later, Brad's routine college life took another unexpected turn when his roommate invited him to a casual gathering at an offbeat cafe just off campus. The dim lighting, vintage furniture, and overpowering scent of clove cigarettes made it obvious this was a space for the alternative crowd, certainly not his usual scene. He sat quietly, listening to conversations about the meaning of colors and the philosophy of broken rules. Across the room, a girl with thick glasses, mismatched patterns, and a restless energy scribbled into a sketchbook, unaware of anything else around her. That was the first time Brad saw Ramona. Brad's introduction to Ramona took place during his university days. Back then, she was a short, full-figured girl with oversized glasses and a complexion troubled by blemishes. Pursuing a degree in art, she expressed herself through a wardrobe that defied convention, her unique taste unmistakable. However, while her originality set her apart, it wasn't the kind of charm that drew most men in, Brad included. Focused on his studies in production technology, his academic interests couldn't have been more different from hers. Nevertheless, due to a shared requirement in their programs, they ended up in the same computer graphics course. She needed it for her art major, and he had to take it as a prerequisite for AutoKD. Circumstances led them to work together on a group assignment. Although they had previously shared classrooms, their interactions had been minimal. From the start, it was apparent they were complete opposites. Brad, a track runner and someone who hovered on the outskirts of the popular social scene, had little in common with Ramona, who immersed herself in cigarettes, coffee, and the company of unconventional thinkers, the poets, the painters, the dreamers. While his dating life consisted of cheerleaders and fellow athletes, Ramona was often overlooked, regarded as a companion rather than a romantic interest among the more traditionally attractive and socially confident members of her circle. The group project necessitated prolonged collaboration, forcing them to spend more time together. Inevitably, they began to notice each other in new ways. One evening, their conversation veered away from academic topics, growing more personal. Just as they seemed to be getting comfortable, Brad's girlfriend arrived to pick him up. As he left, he felt an unexpected sadness about parting from Ramona, and her discontent was equally apparent. The next day, Ramona seemed distant in class. "What did I do now?" Brad asked, confused. "You're such an idiot," she snapped, her voice trembling. Not wanting to escalate things publicly, Brad gently led her outside to a park bench across the street. After asking her to wait, he returned with her favorite juice and a soda for himself, hoping to break the tension. "So why am I an idiot?" he asked with a smile. "Because you just are," she mumbled, wiping away tears. Brad sighed. "That's not much of an explanation." Ramona's voice wavered with bitterness. "I thought you were different, but you're just like all the others. You don't want someone who truly cares for you. All you guys want is some brainless, big-chested girl." Brad paused before responding calmly. "Well, those girls do one thing right." Her eyes narrowed. "What's that?" "They make their feelings known," he said simply. Ramona clenched her fists in frustration, her anger palpable. Brad, wanting to diffuse the moment, took off her oversized glasses and kissed her, deeply and passionately. Unbeknownst to him at the time, it was her first real kiss. She pulled back, stunned. "What the hell was that?" He grinned. "Communication." One kiss led to another, and they spent that evening sharing an intimate connection on the park bench. Over the following weeks, they completed their project, earning an A, and began dating. Ramona underwent changes. She switched to contact lenses, sought help from a dermatologist, and adopted a more mainstream wardrobe. While Brad never requested these changes, her newfound confidence was evident. She frequently sought his input while shopping, and he offered suggestions that highlighted her figure. "You just like staring at my chest," she teased. "Of course," he quipped with a grin, "but they're mine, and you're wearing them for me." Their relationship grew deeper on all levels. As her first boyfriend, Brad made their closeness meaningful. Ramona gradually became more comfortable in their relationship, and her initial insecurities faded under Brad's reassurances of her beauty and his love. A few weeks into their relationship, she sighed while looking at herself in a mirror. "I look like the kind of woman I used to hate." Brad hugged her from behind, smirking. "Maybe so, but you're my woman." This seemed to comfort her, and their bond continued to strengthen. After college, they got engaged. Brad secured a position at an automotive design firm, while Ramona began working as a layout designer for an art magazine. Brad's family embraced Ramona warmly, but her own family was less accepting. At their engagement party, her sister remarked, "Brad's nice enough, I guess, but he probably stifles her creativity." Her mother added, "They're only marrying because she's pregnant. It won't last." Despite the skepticism, Brad and Ramona built a happy life together. At their 7th anniversary party, her mother couldn't resist asking, "When will I become a grandmother?" Ramona quickly replied, "We're trying, Mom." The couple struggled with infertility for years. Eventually, Maddie, Ramona's mother, took matters into her own hands, scheduling them for appointments at a fertility clinic. Brad's tests came back normal, prompting Maddie to suggest they practice more. Ramona's results, however, revealed significant reproductive challenges that made pregnancy unlikely. That night, Brad held Ramona as she cried. "We can always adopt," he whispered. "There are options." Through her tears, she said, "If you want a divorce, I'll understand." He tightened his embrace. "Mona, I will never leave you unless you make me." "My mom thinks you'll cheat to have kids," she muttered. Brad looked into her eyes. "I will never betray you. You're my everything." She sobbed. "Why would you stay with someone like me?" Gently, he cupped her face. "Because I love you more than anything, and I can't imagine life without you." Eventually, she fell asleep in his arms, comforted by his unwavering devotion. Together, they faced whatever challenges came their way, united by their love and resilience. Those days blurred into one another in Brad's mind. The specific details faded with time, but the emotions remained sharp and unrelenting. Yet one memory stood out distinctly. 2 days after their initial appointment, The clinic called them back for further consultation. Sitting across from the doctor, they grew uneasy when she mentioned that Ramona's test results had been sent to a specialist for additional analysis. Then came the devastating news. Ramona was diagnosed with an early but aggressive form of cancer. Suddenly, everything began to make sense. Her constant fatigue, the unrelenting aches in her body, and the mood swings she had been experiencing. The realization left Brad overwhelmed with fear. Fortunately, the cancer was detected early, and her prognosis was optimistic. The doctor referred them to a specialized oncology center, scheduling an appointment for the very next day. Ramona underwent a grueling series of invasive tests. Brad took a leave of absence from work to stay by her side, holding her hand through every procedure, offering constant reassurance, and anxiously waiting for each result. In the weeks that followed, she underwent surgery to remove the affected lymph nodes and began radiation therapy. Determined to support her through every step, Brad stayed in the family suite at the cancer center, ensuring he was with her every morning when she woke up and every night as she drifted to sleep. Although her mother and sister occasionally visited, their demeanor toward Brad remained cold and distant. It was as if they held him accountable, blaming him for circumstances beyond anyone's control. The radiation treatments proved ineffective, damaging healthy tissue as well as cancerous cells. The doctors made the decision to transition her to chemotherapy. By that point, Ramona had lost 40 pounds due to the effects of radiation, and chemotherapy promised even harsher side effects, including the loss of her hair. Throughout the ordeal, the hospital staff proved to be a source of comfort, especially the nurses. Among them, one nurse stood out, Kelly. She was tall and striking, with vibrant red hair and piercing green eyes. Kelly greeted Brad with warmth each morning, often lightening his burden with a joke or a kind word. Her presence became a bright spot during an otherwise dark time. Kelly's support extended beyond professional duty. She worked night shifts, meaning she was often present when Brad left the hospital at night and when he returned early the next morning. Her cheerful demeanor never faltered in his presence, but her compassion was matched by an unyielding sense of justice. One day, Kelly confronted Ramona's mother after Maddie made a snide comment, suggesting Brad would abandon Ramona now that she was ill. Kelly's response was swift and fiery. "This place is emotionally draining," Kelly snapped. "Most of our patients rarely see visitors because their loved ones can't handle the sight of them like this. Or worse, they think cancer is contagious." She stepped closer to Maddie. "But this man, he hasn't left her side. He's here when she's sick, holding the bucket when she vomits and cleaning her up afterward. Were you around for that?" Maddie opened her mouth to reply, but Kelly cut her off. "He helps her to the bathroom, ensuring she keeps her dignity. Did you help with that? He shaved his own head when she started losing her hair so she wouldn't feel alone. Were you here for that?" Kelly's voice softened, almost mocking. "By the way, his shiny head looks great. Not many men could pull that off." Her tone hardened once more. "He gives her sponge baths so she doesn't have to endure the indignity of a stranger doing it. And when her insurance wouldn't cover treatment, he went into debt for your daughter. He's been here every single day, loving her through all of it. Were you?" Kelly folded her arms, her expression unyielding. "Think very carefully about the next words you say about this man, because they'll determine whether you're welcome back on this floor." Brad wasn't present for the confrontation, but the story spread among the nurses who later shared it with him. When he heard about it, he smiled faintly, grateful for Kelly's fierce defense. More importantly, the incident seemed to change Maddie's attitude. She softened toward Brad, even going so far as to pat him on the shoulder during one of her visits. Chemotherapy was brutal on Ramona, leaving her physically depleted but eventually cancer-free. As her health improved, Brad helped her adopt a new diet to rebuild her strength. She underwent several reconstructive surgeries to remove excess skin caused by her dramatic weight loss. Emerging from her battle with cancer, Ramona looked and felt like a different person. She had shed 80 pounds, her skin had cleared, and her hair began to grow back. She traded her glasses for contact lenses, and her self-assurance blossomed. Old acquaintances often didn't recognize her at first glance. Though she wasn't a classic beauty like Kelly, Ramona had become her best self. But to Brad, she had always been, and would always remain, his greatest love. As Ramona recovered, Brad returned to work, taking on extra hours to manage the crushing medical debt they had accumulated. Ramona, however, needed more time before she could resume her career. Their physical relationship, already strong before her illness, reached new heights. It was as if Ramona sought to express her gratitude and love for Brad in the most intimate way possible, rekindling their bond with a renewed intensity born from their shared trials. Together, they emerged stronger, ready to face whatever life had in store. Ramona started spending more time with her old colleagues, filling the hours while Brad worked long shifts. He was glad to see her socializing. Before, she had never been particularly outgoing, and after everything she had endured, she deserved to enjoy herself. At first, he assumed it was just her way of reclaiming her life after cancer, a natural step in moving forward. He didn't question it. He didn't realize his marriage was unraveling. As the weeks passed, Ramona began coming home later, often stumbling through the door, tipsy or outright drunk. "This is the most fun I've ever had," she laughed one night, her words slurred. Brad felt a pang of resentment. While he was grinding through 12 to 16-hour shifts to pay off her medical bills, she was out partying without him. Her wardrobe also changed. She started dressing more provocatively, choosing outfits that left little to the imagination. When Brad asked about it, she brushed him off. "I've never had a body like this before," she said. "I just want to show it off. It's exciting." He nodded, but couldn't shake the gnawing discomfort in his gut. "Since when do you need to show it off to anyone other than me?" he asked. She rolled her eyes. "Don't be that guy, Brad. It's harmless fun." That week, Brad found himself reflecting on their marriage more than usual. Something felt off, but he didn't want to confront it. He loved Ramona. She was his world. After everything they had faced together, her illness, the fear, the sleepless nights, he thought they were stronger than ever. Meanwhile, his relentless dedication at work had not gone unnoticed. The company rewarded his efforts with a promotion, a significant raise, and a hefty bonus. He decided to use it to plan a much-needed getaway, a chance to rekindle their bond. To make it special, he arranged a surprise party for her upcoming birthday, where he would reveal the trip. He was convinced that spending time alone together would bring them back to where they once were. But before he could set his plan in motion, everything fell apart. Ramona had a routine follow-up at the hospital to ensure the cancer hadn't returned. After running some tests, the doctors told her they would call with the results. As she was leaving, she ran into Kelly. Ramona had never liked Kelly. Despite all the changes in her appearance, she still saw herself as the insecure girl from before, and standing next to someone like Kelly, who was effortlessly beautiful, only reinforced that feeling. "Hey, Ramona," Kelly greeted her warmly. "Strange seeing you without your devoted husband." Ramona frowned. "What's that supposed to mean? He's at work." Kelly chuckled softly. "I didn't mean anything by it. You're just lucky, you know? You have someone who loves you so much." Ramona crossed her arms. "Why are we talking about Brad?" Kelly shook her head. "Most men don't stick around when things get hard. If only someone looked at me the way he looks at you." Ramona cut her off. "Yeah, well, it doesn't matter." She wasn't in the mood to think about Brad. She had other plans. Knowing he'd be stuck at work for hours, she decided to return to the bar she had been at the night before. One drink wouldn't hurt. She could be home before he even noticed she was gone. As soon as she walked in, a voice called out, "Oh my God, Ramona, is that really you?" She turned to see Kathleen Kinnison, an old college friend. "What have you been up to?" Kathleen asked, eyes wide. "You've lost so much weight. I barely recognized you." Ramona laughed. "Hey, Kat, just having fun." "How's Brad?" Ramona shrugged. "Working." They grabbed a table, soon joined by a group of guys. Before long, one of them led Ramona to the dance floor. She let herself get lost in the rhythm, in the attention, in the moment. She didn't notice when the door swung open, but every guy in the bar did. Kelly had just walked in. Ramona was too wrapped up in the music to see her, too engrossed in the thrill of being admired. But Kelly saw everything, what she was doing and who she was doing it with. She didn't say a word. She ordered a sandwich from the grill and walked out. Back at the hospital, an idea began to take shape in her mind. Meanwhile, Brad remained blissfully unaware of what was happening. He worked tirelessly, putting the final touches on Ramona's surprise party, hoping it would bring them closer again. He invited her mother, sister, and a handful of close friends, carefully selecting gifts to make the celebration perfect. Surprisingly, Maddie offered to help decorate. Though she had once been distant, she had grown to respect Brad after seeing the depth of his devotion to Ramona. While she may not have loved him, she had at least accepted him. In the days leading up to the party, Brad noticed a disturbing trend. Every time he came home, Ramona was heading out. She rarely waited for him anymore, and when she did return, it was often in the early hours of the morning, sometimes drunk. Their physical connection, once a source of passion, had all but disappeared. He couldn't even remember the last time they had made love. Oddly, his co-workers seemed to sense his frustration. Some of the women at work flirted more openly, and while he ignored their advances, he couldn't deny the growing loneliness. Then, one evening, just as he walked through the front door, the phone rang. "Hey, Brad, it's Kelly," the familiar voice said. His stomach tensed. "Hey, Kelly, do you have Ramona's test results?" "Not yet," she replied, her tone unusually serious. "But I need to talk to you. It's important. Can we meet somewhere? It won't take long." Brad hesitated. Sure. How about the park across from the hospital?" There was a brief pause. "That works. I can be there in 20 minutes. "All right. See you there," Brad said before hanging up. The park had always been a place of refuge for Brad during Ramona's illness. He and Kelly had shared a few impromptu dinners there while he waited for her procedures to end. It was also the place where Kelly had first told him that the chemotherapy was working. Perhaps that's why she had chosen this spot. She didn't want to taint it with bad news. When Brad arrived, he spotted Kelly sitting on a small bench. He walked over and sat beside her, offering a weary but friendly smile. "Did I miss a payment?" he joked. "Or worse, Ramona isn't sick again, is she?" Kelly's expression turned somber. "She's sick, but not with cancer." A cold, uneasy feeling settled in Brad's stomach. Over the next few minutes, Kelly revealed everything: where she had seen Ramona, what she had been doing, and who she had been with. "I don't have any proof," she admitted. "No pictures, no recordings. But from what I saw, it's obvious she's being unfaithful." Brad let out a short, humorless laugh, more out of disbelief than anything else. "Kelly, you're a great nurse. And until now, I thought you were a great person too." He shook his head. "Ramona wouldn't do that to me. She loves me." The words felt empty even as he spoke them. Kelly sighed. "I wouldn't tell you this unless I was sure. I just hate seeing you go through this." Brad clenched his fists. "I don't believe it. All you have are suspicions," he continued. "No solid proof. Maybe it's best if you stay out of it." He stood to leave, but Kelly reached out and gently took his hand. Then she touched his cheek, her fingers warm against his skin. For some reason, he froze. The anger inside him melted away. "For your sake," she said softly. "I hope I'm wrong. It eliminates me to think of you sacrificing so much for someone who doesn't deserve you." Her fingers traced down his cheek, and for a brief second, he swore he felt something, a jolt of electricity. "If you ever need a friend, I'm here," she whispered, slipping a small card into his hand before walking away. Brad watched her leave, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. It had been so long since he and Ramona had truly connected, and yet, in that moment, he had felt something undeniable just watching Kelly disappear into the night. Meanwhile, Kelly felt a sense of satisfaction. She hadn't expected everything to fall apart for Ramona overnight, but Brad needed to see the truth, piece by piece, before it destroyed him all at once. She had no intention of hurting him, but he deserved to know what was really happening. She couldn't pinpoint exactly when she had fallen for him. Maybe it was during those long nights at the hospital, watching him care for a woman who barely seemed to appreciate him. Or maybe it was later, when Ramona began treating him more like a personal assistant than a husband. A man who had given up everything for her. Kelly had always known she was attractive. Men had told her that her whole life. But no man had ever treated her the way Brad had treated Ramona. And she would have given anything to have a man like that love her. It was time for step 2. 2 nights later, Brad was buzzing with anticipation. The party wasn't just about Ramona's birthday. It was supposed to be a turning point, a fresh start for their marriage. Over the past few weeks, he had taken note of how distant she had become. She was drinking too much, staying out too late, barely speaking to him. The night before, he had fallen asleep waiting for her to come home. When he woke up, she was already in bed, passed out. That morning, as she stirred awake, he smiled. "I planned something special for your birthday." She rolled over, her voice groggy. "That's sweet." Brad knew she had likely been out partying, but he tried to rationalize it. She had survived cancer. Maybe she was just trying to experience the things fat Ramona had never gotten the chance to. He just wished she wanted to experience them with him. At 6:30 p.m., Maddie and Ramona's sister Ravana arrived to help decorate the apartment. They moved quickly, expecting Ramona to walk in any minute. Brad had kept the guest list small, just 6 people, those closest to her. He wanted the night to be intimate, meaningful. By 9 p.m., guests were whispering among themselves. Ramona still hadn't shown up. A few left their gifts on the table and headed home. By 11 p.m., only Maddie, Ravana, and Brad remained. Frustration simmered inside him as he called Ramona's phone for the fourth time. Finally, at 11:30, she called back. "Hey, sweetheart," she slurred. "I'm on my way." Brad's grip on the phone tightened. "Where are you?" "Mom wanted to take me out for a drink," she said casually. "So I went with her instead of coming straight home." Brad clenched his jaw. "We had plans tonight, Ramona." I know, we just lost track of time," she replied, brushing him off. "I actually went with her and my snotty sister, because they still don't like you very much. I didn't want their attitudes to ruin whatever surprise you had planned for me." In the background, a man's voice cut through the noise. "Hurry up, baby. We're waiting." Brad's stomach dropped. Ramona giggled. "Anyway, I'll see you soon, and you can give me my surprise then." She hesitated. "Is it a big surprise?" Brad's voice was quiet. "Something like that." A heavy silence followed. Maddie turned to him, and in her eyes, he saw it. The understanding, the sympathy. She knew. She had heard everything. For a moment, Brad just sat there, unable to process what had just happened. His entire world had cracked open, and he didn't even know how to react. Maddie finally broke the silence. I didn't always think you were the right man for Ramona." Brad looked up at her, dazed. "But I was wrong," she admitted. "What a witch," Ravana muttered under her breath. Brad took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Thank you both for coming. I'll clean up this mess and put away the gifts." His voice was eerily calm. "I'm sure she'll be back soon. You're welcome to stay, but I don't think it's worth it." "Why not?" Ravana challenged, crossing her arms. "As her naughty sister, I'd love to see the look on her face when she walks in and gets caught in her damn lie." Brad shook his head. "She went through hell with cancer. None of us know what that was like for her. Maybe this is how she's coping." His voice was barely above a whisper. Maddie and Ravana exchanged glances before silently heading toward the door. Once they were gone, Brad walked to the bedroom closet and grabbed a suitcase. He packed quickly, just enough to make sure he wouldn't have to come back anytime soon. Before leaving, he scribbled a note and placed it on the kitchen table. Then, without a second thought, he walked out the door. The next morning at work, Brad sat at his desk, staring blankly at his computer screen. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he searched for a divorce attorney. He found several promising options, but he couldn't bring himself to make a call. His mind was a storm of emotions. Anger, betrayal, grief. He barely spoke to anyone. His coworkers probably assumed he was coming down with something, a bad cold or the flu. In reality, he felt worse than sick. He felt hollow. Meanwhile, Ramona called his phone repeatedly, leaving voicemail after voicemail. He ignored every single one. For 3 days, he stuck to the same routine. Go to work, return to his motel, sleep, wake up, repeat. He functioned on autopilot, burying himself in work to avoid thinking about everything that had unraveled. On the third evening, as he stepped out of his office building, he spotted Kelly perched on the hood of his car. Her face was drawn, her eyes red as if she had been crying. As soon as she saw him, she slid off the car, marching toward him. "Why didn't you call me?" she demanded, her voice laced with concern. Brad didn't answer. He just stood there, looking at her. The emotional barricade he had built over the past few days finally collapsed. Tears welled in his eyes as he whispered, "Everything you told me was true." Before he could say anything else, Kelly wrapped her arms around him. He knew he should have pulled away. He should have resisted, but he didn't. And when her body pressed against his, a warmth spread through him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. And he hated himself for it. "I never wanted to hurt you," she murmured. "I just didn't want you to be blindsided." Ramona woke up with a splitting headache, her temples throbbing. She groaned, rubbing her forehead. "What day is it?" she muttered, squinting at the clock. The apartment was a disaster. Empty bottles, clothes scattered, dishes piled in the sink. "Brad's gonna have to clean this place up," she grumbled. Then she frowned. "Wait, where the hell is he?" A sudden knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Annoyed, she threw on a robe and stumbled toward it. Peeking through the peephole, she let out a sigh of relief. It was her mother. Opening the door, she forced a weak smile. "Hey, Mom, sorry about the mess. My husband seems to have a new habit of disappearing lately." Maddie stepped inside, her expression unreadable. She scanned Ramona from head to toe. "Where were you last night, and what were you doing?" Maddie's tone was sharp. Ramona blinked, confused. "What? What are you talking about?" Maddie crossed her arms. "Or, judging by the state you're in, who were you with?" Ramona rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Mom, not this again." "Then explain why you have hickeys on your neck." Ramona froze. Her hand flew to her throat, her fingers brushing against the sore marks. "Crap," she muttered. "Brad better not see this." She turned away. "Mom, make some coffee. My head is liquidating me." Maddie sighed, walking into the kitchen and switching on the coffee maker. As she waited, she spoke over her shoulder. "So, how did you manage to lie your way out of this one?" Ramona yawned. "Lie about what?" "The night of your birthday," Maddie said coolly. "When you told Brad you were with me and your sister, we were standing right next to him." Ramona's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes snapped open. She exhaled slowly, trying to think. "I'll figure something out before he gets home," she muttered. "You have to help me, Mom." Maddie turned to her, an unmistakable look of disgust on her face. "Why should I?" Ramona sighed. "Look, I know I've made mistakes, but it wasn't serious. I was just having fun. I never got to do this when I was younger." Maddie didn't respond. Ramona pressed on. "You remember what it was like, Mom? I was always the fat friend, the one guys ignored. Then I met Brad, and suddenly I felt like I mattered. I dressed better. I felt confident. For once, I was the girl someone actually wanted." Her voice softened. "But now that I've lost weight, men notice me. They flirt. They chase me. It's intoxicating. I can tease them, string them along, then discard them when I'm done. It's fun, Mom. It's nothing serious." She gave Maddie a pleading look. "I love Brad. I'd never actually leave him. He's safe, stable, but he's also boring. I need excitement too, and he'll never find out anyway. He's too busy working himself into the ground." Maddie let out a quiet sigh. "You really believe that?" She walked over to the table, picking up a folded piece of paper. "Because if you do," she said, handing it to Ramona, "you might want to read this." Ramona frowned, unfolding the note. "Ramona, I'm really happy you're having fun. After everything you've been through, you deserve to enjoy life. Beating cancer is rare, and you didn't just survive, you thrived. From the moment I met you, I knew you were special. I fell for you completely, and for years I thought we had something unbreakable. But I've come to realize something. I don't fit into your life anymore. I was yours from the beginning, but I see now that you've outgrown me. I hope you get this letter in time to call me so we can talk, if there's even anything left to talk about. If I don't hear from you, I'll take it as confirmation of what I already know. I'll be filing for divorce. The apartment is yours. I won't be coming back. There are too many memories here. I just hope whoever comes after me treats you the way I did. I gave you everything, Ramona, but in the end, I wasn't enough. Brad." As she finished reading, Ramona's legs gave out beneath her. She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. Maddie stood over her, shaking her head. "What a fool I raised." Across town, Kelly pulled into her driveway with Brad in the passenger seat. She parked, then walked around the car to open his door. He barely reacted as she guided him inside, his movements sluggish, his expression distant. She led him to the couch, studying his face. He looked completely drained, physically, emotionally, mentally. He was running on empty. He doesn't even realize how strong he is, Kelly thought. But I'm going to help him get rid of that woman. She hadn't told him everything yet. A private investigator had been trailing Ramona for a week. Kelly knew exactly when Brad had left, exactly what Ramona had been up to, but she wasn't going to tell him tonight. He wasn't ready for that. Leaving him to rest on the couch, she changed into shorts and a t-shirt before heading to the kitchen. She cooked a simple dinner, steaks and salad. When she set the plate in front of him, he barely touched it, just pushing his fork around absent-mindedly. The silence stretched between them, thick and unbroken. After dinner, Kelly casually picked up Brad's phone and checked for any missed calls. Nothing. That was a good sign. It meant Ramona was still too intoxicated to realize he was gone. Without hesitation, she powered off the phone and set it aside before making a quick call to the hospital. "I won't be in for a few days," she informed them, her tone leaving no room for argument. She turned to Brad. "You should take some time off, too." He shook his head. "I can't afford to. There are still bills to cover." Kelly wasn't letting him use work as an excuse to avoid dealing with everything. She handed him the phone. "Call in. Now." Brad hesitated, staring at the device for a moment before finally relenting. He requested 2 days off, then tossed the phone aside without another thought. Later that evening, Kelly brought him a blanket and helped him get comfortable on the couch. Kneeling beside him, she traced her fingers lightly over his forehead before pressing a soft kiss there. "If you need anything, I'm right upstairs," she said, before disappearing down the hall. That same night, Ramona's frustration grew with every unanswered call. Where the hell was he? She needed to talk to him, to explain. He wouldn't leave her, not for real. He was her stability, the one person who had always been there. Sure, she had made a few reckless choices lately, but none of it had meant anything. Just a little fun, that's all. Her marriage was what mattered. Brad had loved her when no one else had, back when she was invisible to everyone but him. He had seen her for who she really was, long before she ever lost the weight. They had faced the darkest days together, battling her illness as a team. Without him, she wouldn't have made it through. He had been the one holding her hand through the worst of it, shaving his head so she wouldn't feel alone. How could she have been so careless? She called again. Still no answer. Desperate, she dialed his office. He had to be there. He was always working. His boss answered. "Brad's off for a few days." Her stomach tightened. "Off? Where did he go?" "No idea," came the indifferent response. "Oh, and by the way, he doesn't work in this department anymore. He got promoted a while ago." She froze. Brad had been promoted? Since when? For the first time, doubt crept in. Up until now, she had assumed he was just angry, sulking somewhere, waiting for her to call and set things right. All she had to do was get him home. They'd talk, she'd convince him, they'd sleep together, and things would go back to normal. They had been through too much for it to end like this. Sitting in the dim apartment, she replayed everything in her mind. Was what she had done really worth losing him? She had always thought she was too smart to make mistakes like this. How had she let herself become someone she used to mock? At first, it had just been about feeling alive again, experiencing the things she had never been able to before. But now she realized she had never actually been in control. The attention from other men had given her a false sense of power, but in the end, she had thrown away something that had only ever belonged to Brad. There was no real connection in what she had done, no love, just meaningless, drunken encounters. The only thing that mattered now was how much Brad knew and what she would have to do to get him to forgive her. But deep down, she knew the truth. She couldn't even forgive herself. Meanwhile, Kelly took her time, ensuring Brad didn't completely break under the weight of it all. They returned to his motel to pick up his things. Then she convinced him to buy a few essentials. Eventually, he agreed to move into the guest room at her house. Gradually, she got him to open up. At first, it was just small responses, but soon they were having real conversations. The only thing they didn't talk about was Ramona. 2 days later, Kelly handed Brad his phone. He turned it on and checked his messages. Over 100 missed calls from Ramona. Without hesitation, he deleted them all. Kelly noticed the way his expression hardened, the shift in his posture. He was starting to regain control. Back at work, Brad felt somewhat steady. He wasn't okay, far from it, but he was functioning. His coworkers had noticed Kelly dropping him off earlier that week, and the office gossip had already started. "So, Brad," his friend Dave grinned, "who was driving that red Mustang?" "Man's got a model looking out for him," another guy added, with a whistle. Brad smirked but didn't respond. Kelly was undeniably beautiful. More stunning than Ramona had ever been, if he was being honest. But did he really believe that? His mood soured when someone threw out a joke about him cheating on his wife with the redhead. Nobody knew what had really happened. Nobody knew the truth about Ramona. They all just assumed he was fine. Just as he was about to head out for the day, a security guard stormed into his office. "You need to get outside, right now." Brad frowned. "What's going on?" "Just get out there, you'll see." As he stepped into the parking lot, he wasn't sure what to expect. A broken windshield? A slashed tire? What he found was worse. Ramona's voice cut through the air, her rage spilling out for everyone to hear. "You home-wrecking hooker, stay the hell away from my husband!" Standing next to his car, Kelly folded her arms. "You abandoned him. You don't get to claim him now." "What the hell are you even talking about?" Ramona spat. "You drowned yourself in booze and threw him away," Kelly shot back. Security had already stepped in to keep them apart, but a crowd had gathered, whispering as they watched the scene unfold. Brad pushed past the onlookers. Without acknowledging Ramona, he walked straight to Kelly, opened the car door, and motioned for her to get in. "Go home," he said calmly. "I'll be right behind you." She hesitated, searching his face, then nodded and slid into the car. Turning to security, Brad gestured toward Ramona. "Hold her here for 10 minutes." Ramona's eyes widened. "Brad, wait!" she cried, struggling against the guards. "We need to talk. We can fix this. You still love me. I know you do." The worst part? She was right, but Brad didn't turn back. He climbed into his car and drove off, his vision blurred with unshed tears. That evening, Brad sat on Kelly's couch, staring blankly at his hands, lost in thought. "What are you going to do now?" Kelly asked softly. He exhaled slowly. I need to understand what happened in my marriage." Kelly studied him carefully. "Are you sure that's what you really want?" "Of course," he said. She shook her head. "I don't think you do." Kelly stepped out of the room and returned moments later, holding a thick manila envelope. She placed it on the table between them, then took a step back as if creating distance from what was inside. "This has everything," she said softly. "But please, don't open it." Brad's brow furrowed as he glanced down at the envelope. "What exactly is in there?" She sighed. "When I first told you about her, you said I didn't have proof. And you were right. I knew what I saw, but I also knew how easy it was to lie to yourself, because I did the same thing when it happened to me." Taking a steadying breath, she continued. "I knew you wouldn't believe it without evidence, so I had someone look into it. A private investigator. He's my cousin, and he owed me a favor." Brad swallowed hard. "And what did he find?" Kelly nodded toward the envelope. "Photos, audio, video, reports, receipts, every ugly detail. But if there's even a shred of love left in your heart for her, I'm telling you, you don't want to see it." Brad's fists clenched. "You already know she broke your trust," Kelly added. "Seeing it for yourself won't change that. It'll only make it worse. If you open that folder, you won't be able to unsee what's inside." She exhaled. "You're starting to move forward, Brad. Looking at this will only pull you back." She turned toward the kitchen. "What do you want for dinner?" Brad reached forward, hesitated for a split second, then pulled out the first photograph. The image hit him like a gut punch. Ramona sprawled across a bar table, her dress bunched up around her hips. 3 men surrounding her. His chest constricted, breath catching in his throat. His mind blanked. He shoved the picture back into the envelope and hurled it across the room. His entire body trembled as he dropped into a chair, head in his hands. Kelly sat beside him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. Neither of them spoke for the rest of the night. By morning, neither had changed their minds. Both Brad and Kelly called into work, then headed to a lawyer's office. Sherry, Brad's attorney, skimmed through the paperwork. "This shouldn't take long. No kids, few assets. The only real complication is the medical debt." "I'll cover it," Brad said flatly. Sherry arched a brow. "Why?" "I just will." "You're drowning in debt because of her," Sherry reminded him. "And how did she repay you?" Well, let's not spell it out." Brad didn't respond. Sherry sighed. "Fine. Either way, this will be an easy case. If she tries to fight it, we can use the evidence. Exposing what she did would ruin her reputation." Brad nodded. He wanted this over. But Ramona had no intention of making it easy. When she was served the divorce papers, she didn't just refuse to sign, she tore them to shreds. Not only did she refuse to get a lawyer, but she wouldn't even acknowledge the divorce itself. "I'm not signing anything," she snapped. Instead, she proposed a legal separation and insisted on counseling. "I just need time," she pleaded. "Tell Brad to come home so we can fix this." Sherry didn't buy it. "If you don't cooperate, we'll change the filing to infidelity. That won't look good for you." Ramona laughed coldly. "You'll have to do better than that, sweetheart. I told you I'm not letting this marriage go without a fight." Sherry folded her arms. "You think you can stop it?" "If you need to fly to the Vatican to have the Pope declare this marriage unbreakable, I'll buy your ticket," Ramona sneered. "But I'm not losing my husband to you or that red-headed witch." She refused to consider any option that didn't involve talking to Brad. Sherry sighed later that day. "She's ruthless," she told him. "You should meet with her. If you refuse, it won't look good in court." 2 days later, Brad sat across from Ramona in Sherry's office. Her eyes were puffy, red-rimmed. "Why are you doing this to us?" His voice was cold. "You did this, Ramona." She exhaled slowly. "Okay. I got carried away. I drank too much. I neglected you. I know I hurt you." Brad didn't respond. "But we've been together for a decade," she whispered. "That has to count for something." His jaw tightened. "I love you, Brad," she murmured. "You know that." "You lied to me," he said. "You betrayed me. You never once thought about how I felt. It was always about you, about what you wanted." Her lips trembled. "I had cancer." His expression darkened. "And? You don't understand what that does to a person," she whispered. "After facing something like that, Your perspective shifts. I needed to feel alive again. Ramona, I get it, he said. And now, you have all the time in the world to experience life the way you want. I won't stand in your way. You can sleep with whoever you want every night with a room full of strangers, and no one will care. He pushed back his chair and stood up. Her voice cracked. You can't just walk away from me. Brad leaned on the chair, motioning for her to sit back down. You never had cancer, he said. She blinked. What? He raised a hand, cutting off her protest. We had cancer. His voice wavered, but his eyes burned with emotion. I was there every single day, watching you suffer. His tone hardened. Only it was worse for me. You felt the pain, but at least they gave you something for it. I had to watch, helpless, as the woman I loved wasted away. Ramona swallowed, eyes flickering to the floor. There were nights I would have given anything to trade places with you, Brad continued. If I could have taken your place, I would have. But I never left you. His voice softened, but the pain in it was unmistakable. I had to pretend everything was fine so you wouldn't lose hope. But I was dying too, every single day. And when visiting hours ended, I'd go home and break down. I was terrified of losing you. Tears burned at the edges of her eyes. When it was over, I was ready to start living again too, he said. But the person I wanted to share that life with was too busy drinking, too busy with other men. She flinched. And one of us had to work to pay off all those medical bills, he said, his voice cold. So now you have a new body, a new lease on life, and I have nothing but debt. Her fingers curled into her lap. You had all these new priorities, and I wasn't one of them, he continued. You claim to love me. So tell me, Ramona, how do you think it felt knowing you were sleeping with other men? She took in a shaky breath. I'm sure they were all great guys, he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. But where were they when you were lying in a hospital bed, dying? Silence. Cancer didn't eliminate you, he murmured. But it destroyed us. He slid the papers toward her. Sign them, he said. I have nothing left to say. Then, without another word, he walked out. Ramona sat there, staring at the divorce papers, as silent tears streamed down her face. As Brad stepped out of the lawyer's office, Kelly was already there, leaning against her car. She didn't ask how it went. His face told her everything. His shoulders were heavy with exhaustion, his expression hollow. Words wouldn't help right now, so she didn't offer any. When they reached the car, she tossed him the keys. He caught them automatically, a flicker of something resembling a smile crossing his face. He loved this car. Back in its day, the 03 Mustang SVT Cobra had been a monster, built for speed, nicknamed the Terminator. Take us home, she said with a small smile. He slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel, his fingers tightening around the leather. The divorce will go through whether she signs or not, Kelly added. Brad stared at the road ahead but didn't start the engine. Can we just drive for a bit? Kelly shook her head. No, we have the rest of our lives for that. She reached over and squeezed his hand. Right now, you need rest and food. When they pulled into Kelly's driveway, Brad lingered by the car for a moment, reluctant to go inside. He wanted to keep driving, to lose himself in the roar of the engine, to feel something other than the wreckage of his past. Kelly, already inside, didn't wait for him. She walked across the room, shedding her coat and letting it drop to the floor. He followed her, eyes catching the way she moved. Without a glance back, she unbuttoned her blouse and let it slip from her shoulders, her lips curving slightly as she reached the stairs. One heel clattered to the floor, then the other. Halfway up, she slid her tights off, twirling them around her fingers before tossing them aside. At the top of the stairs, she paused, looking over her shoulder, eyes locking with his, a silent challenge. Then, with a smirk, she disappeared down the hall. Brad stood frozen. For the first time in weeks, he felt something other than pain. He moved without thinking, collecting the trail of discarded clothes as he climbed the stairs. He didn't know why, he just did. At the landing, she was waiting. Fingers reaching behind her back, she unhooked her bra, letting it slide away effortlessly. His breath caught. "Come get me," she whispered. Then she turned and ran, laughing softly. Brad finally understood the words of a certain funk legend. Why must I be like that? Why must I chase the cat? Now it all made sense. He chased her down the hall to her bedroom, where she was already peeling away the last of the barriers between them. She knelt before him, fingers working at his shirt, lips trailing over newly exposed skin. Every inch of distance between them disappeared. Every wall he had built came crashing down. "Kelly, She silenced him with a touch. Where Ramona had been passive, hesitant, Kelly was fire, unapologetic, untamed. She didn't just share herself. She took him, claimed him, and in return, gave him everything. There was no hesitation, no regret, no looking back. That night she made sure he forgot about the past and lived in the moment. Kelly understood betrayal all too well. She had once been married to a man who believed that no matter how beautiful a woman was, she would eventually become dull, just another thing to discard. When she caught him cheating for the third time, she had asked him why. "You always need something fresh." She had walked out and never looked back. For years, she had waited for a man who loved the way Brad had loved. And when she saw Ramona throw it all away, she knew she would never make the same mistake. Ramona's loss was her gain, and she would make sure Brad never doubted what he meant to her. Weeks passed, and still, Ramona refused to sign the divorce papers. She had no intention of letting him go. She hired a private investigator, desperate to find proof that Brad had moved on. If she could prove he was cheating, she could file for divorce on her terms, paint herself as the sufferer, and convince herself they were even. In her mind, this was just another step in their relationship. She had made mistakes, he had taken his revenge, and now they could put it behind them and start fresh. She just hoped he wouldn't take too long to come home, because she wasn't feeling well. No one checked on her anymore. No one fussed over her, doted on her, or made her feel special the way Brad had. But once he came back, everything would go back to the way it was. He would take care of her, hold her, clean up after her, love her the way he always had. He had to. One evening, she finally saw them. Through a restaurant window, she spotted Brad and Kelly. Kelly reached across the table, brushing her fingers over his cheek. He caught her hand, turned it over, and kissed it. Something inside Ramona twisted. This wasn't the plan. Brad wasn't just sleeping with Kelly. Brad was in love with her. A white-hot rage surged through her. She stormed into the restaurant, shoving past tables, knocking over a chair in her fury. "Get your hands off my husband, you cheap hooker!" she shrieked. Kelly didn't flinch. "You threw him away!" Ramona's hands curled into fists. "I never wanted him to leave." Kelly tilted her head. "But you didn't want him enough to stay faithful either. You won't take my husband from me." Kelly leaned in, voice steady. "I already have." Ramona's face contorted with rage. "Like hell you do. First, I'll eliminate you." Brad stood. "Ramona, enough." She turned to him, ready to unleash another tirade. But suddenly the room spun. Her body swayed, balance slipping. Her face paled. "I don't feel right," she whispered. Moments later, she stumbled out of the restaurant. 3 months later, Brad and Kelly were married. Ramona never signed the divorce papers. It didn't matter. The cancer had come back, and this time it wasn't going away. She was admitted to the hospital once more. The doctors did everything they could. The nurses provided the best care possible. But this time there was no one sitting by her bed, no comforting hand to hold. Without Brad's steadfast presence, without the love that had once anchored her, the will to keep fighting slowly faded away. She wrote to him, long, desperate letters filled with regret, filled with pleas for another chance. She begged him to visit, to see her just once. He sent only one response. "Sign the papers and I'll come." She never did. The illness moved quickly, showing no mercy. Within a month, she was gone. Brad and Kelly attended the funeral. When his turn came to speak, Brad stood before the small gathering, his voice calm and composed. He spoke about the woman he had once loved, about the memories they had shared. He did not mention the pain, the betrayal, or the way it had all unraveled. He honored what had been good and left the rest unspoken. At the end of his speech, he turned to the small group of relatives seated before him. "My wife and I have chosen to name our daughter after Ramona," he announced. A quiet murmur rippled through the crowd. Kelly, standing beside him, gently squeezed his hand, but said nothing. That night, as the fire crackled in the hearth, Brad sat in silence, lost in thought. Ramona had always said she had beaten cancer. At one time, he had believed that, together, they had conquered it. But the truth was something else entirely. Ramona hadn't defeated cancer. She had become it. From the moment she left the hospital, she had changed. She had become reckless, volatile, destructive. She had let her suffering consume her until it spread to everything she touched. Her marriage, her relationships, her sense of self. And when she couldn't get what she wanted, she had torn herself apart. Brad exhaled, watching the flames flicker. Kelly nestled against him, her hand resting over the small curve of her stomach. Outside, parked beneath the soft glow of the moon, his Mustang gleamed. He smiled faintly. His wife was with him. Their child was on the way. Love, warmth, and peace surrounded him. And for the first time in a long time, Brad knew he had finally found happiness.
Story 4.
After my deadbeat brother abandoned his kids with our parents, they expect me to step in financially, despite ignoring me for years when I needed help. I, 31, male, have had no contact with my parents for almost 6 years after I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and I asked them to help me out with the cost of my medication since my insurance wouldn't, but they refused. I was between jobs at the time, so I was short on money, and everybody knows how expensive medicines are, but, as usual, my parents let me down. We got into a pretty bad fight when they refused, and I told them that it was a bit stupid of me to expect anything from them in the first place, since they had never bothered to care about me at all. And they never tried to apologize to me after that. So we just stopped speaking to each other. Even when we would see each other at family get-togethers, we wouldn't speak. They were on good terms with my brother, in spite of him being a total screw-up though, which isn't surprising since he always was their favorite. My older brother, Carson, 39, male, is a high-functioning alcoholic and has, unfortunately, been that way for the past 8 years. He has gone sober several times but has never been able to make it stick. I honestly feel bad for him because a couple of months back he lost his wife in an accident and was left with 2 kids, both boys under 10, to take care of. I knew his wife. She was a wonderful, sweet person, and I think she was the only thing keeping him from becoming a full-fledged raging alcoholic who couldn't be bothered to do anything else but drink himself to. Unconsciousness every day. The grieving just made it worse, and he was fired from his job shortly after his wife passed away because he hadn't even bothered to show up or explain his absence. Every single day, he would drop his kids off at his in-laws' house or our parents' house, and then spend the rest of the day drinking at home. He would only sober up enough to drive to pick his children up, bring them back home, and then put them to bed. The next day, he would repeat the same thing. About a week ago, he had dropped his kids off at our parents' place and said that he would be back to pick them up at the end of the day, as usual. But a couple of hours after that, he just sent them an email saying that he wouldn't be returning because he knew that he was not a good father to his children and didn't want them to grow up with him. So, he was leaving them with my parents because he knew that they could care for them better and wished them luck. He had also blocked our parents and his in-laws after that, so they couldn't reach out to him either, and nobody had any idea where he was. After a couple of days of trying to find out where he was, they gave up, and my parents decided to contact me and tell me all about this so they could ask me to help them out financially. Both my parents are retired now, and they do have retirement funds set aside for them, but if they start taking care of the kids, they are going to need more money, and they are not sure if they will be able to support themselves and the kids with just the money that they have. Carson's in-laws have already surrendered and have said that they will not be able to take on this responsibility, so I'm the only person that they can count on because I'm family, and they were relying on me now. I haven't really had any contact with Carson over the past couple of years. We were not on bad terms, but we were never really close. I guess it might be because of the age gap, but we were just never very brotherly to each other. So I liked my nephews, but I thought it was unfair of them to ask me for help, especially when I knew that they had the resources and the means to raise the kids on their own. My parents had been pretty well off when they were working, so I found it hard to believe that they wouldn't be able to raise 2 kids on their own without my financial help. I told them that as much as I wanted the kids to have a bright future, I could not keep my own aside and prioritize them, so I wouldn't be helping them out with the money. Instead of respecting that, my parents started arguing with me and said that as a member of the family, I should realize that we are in this together and that I need to help them. I found that pretty laughable because I still remember what they had said to me when I had asked them to help with my medical expenses 6 years ago. And I repeated the same words to them. Don't rely on us just because we're your family. You need to figure some things out on your own. That's what they had said to me when I had told them that I needed them to help me out for a couple of months with the cost of medication since it was necessary and expensive. But everything else I would manage on my own. And it wasn't even a lot of money. I was eventually able to do it on my own after cutting a lot of corners, which I wouldn't have had to do if they had just helped me out. But what they were asking for here was a lot of money every year, and I had a future to think about as well. As a matter of fact, I do plan on having kids of my own in a year or two since my wife, 30, female, and I have also been married for 2 years now, so it's not practical for me to commit to contributing to helping them out. And I made that very clear to them. Besides, we have not been in touch for the past 6 years. What were they even expecting anyway? They got really pissed off when I repeated their own words back to them. They said that I was being a jerk and that they couldn't believe that I was just turning my back on them like this, just because of something that had happened 6 years ago. Then they started emotionally manipulating me and asked me if I was in their place, would I have said the same thing? So I told them that if I were in their place, I would have called CPS and let them handle it because this was getting too much for me. Then I hung up. But my parents told everybody about the CPS comment that I had made and how I had refused to help them. And now the rest of the family is texting me to let me know that I'm being really heartless right now. I don't understand what to do. AITA for telling my parents that I will not be helping them out with money to raise my deadbeat alcoholic brother's kids? Edit. So I guess I wasn't exactly clear with how my relationship with my brother and his family was. First things first, I actually knew his wife from before they got married because we went to the same college together, and it was a happy little coincidence. Secondly, I had never tried to go no contact with my brother, but I guess it just happened because after I cut my parents out of my life, even he stopped speaking to me. He congratulated me on my wedding a couple of years back, but that was it. So I guess he had also started distancing himself from me after my fallout with my parents, and I guess I resented him a bit for that. And yes, even though I had remained in no contact with my parents, I had never blocked them. I don't really have a reason for it. I guess I just forgot or never really found it necessary because the last time that we fought, 6 years back, I had believed that they would eventually reach out to me to apologize or at least try to talk to me. And that's why I had kept that door open. But when they didn't, I decided to just forget about it, so I never blocked them. And most importantly, I did not tell my parents to report this situation to CPS because I don't care for the well-being of my nephews, but because I don't think that having an alcoholic as a father was helping them in any way. If my parents were really finding it difficult to deal with them, then what other option did they have anyway? I didn't mean to make it sound like I was being heartless, so that might have been misconstrued and taken out of context, but I just wanted to put an end to that conversation. However, ultimately, it is their choice what they want to do. That's that out of the way, so I hope this gives you guys some more context about my relationship with my family. Update 1. Hello everybody. Thanks to everyone who commented on the original post. I feel much better and more confident about my decision after going through the comment section. I finally blocked my parents after 6 years since I realized that there was nothing good that was going to come out of this. I also blocked all my relatives who had texted me to let me know that I was wrong for what I was doing and that I was emotionless and heartless. These are the same people who saw me being treated badly all my life and never stepped up for me. But now just because I refuse to help my parents out when they need it, I'm the bad guy? Yeah, right. My parents have always been closed off and aloof with me, and even when I was younger I could see how differently I was treated from my brother. They did not even bother to put up an act when we were around the rest of our family, so it was not a big secret that my parents had a favorite, and it was not me, and nobody ever stood up for me. So I don't really think I need to tolerate any of this. This is why my wife and I decided that we were obviously going to stay no contact with my parents, but we were also going to cut my side of the family off entirely. We don't need that sort of negativity in our life, to be honest. My wife's family is pretty much my family at this point, so it's not like I'll be missing out on anything either. We anyway celebrate all the major events with her family, so I don't think this will make much of a difference to either of us. I actually feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders because, even in the past, my family would occasionally hint to me that my parents were getting old and they were lonely. So I should probably fix things with them before it's too late. And I could never explain to them that it was not me who needed to fix anything. It was they who needed to come to me, and until they did that, I was not going to put aside my self-respect and go to them. But now I don't have to explain that to anybody because nobody's going to be bothering me about my parents anymore. Update 2. Hello. 2 weeks have passed since my last update, and my parents paid me a visit today. I had blocked them, so they couldn't reach me otherwise, and so they had to come and see me in person. Or at least that's what they said to me when they saw me outside in the front yard. It was my bad luck that I was out there in the first place since I thought that today would be a good day to prune some of the hedges. So I was outside in the morning, and then my parents pulled up in a cab. When they got out, I tried to rush inside the house, but they had already spotted me and told me that I needed to wait. For some reason, I decided to wait so they could come and we could speak, probably because I didn't want to look like a cowardly fool rushing inside the house to avoid interacting with them. Once they were there, I told them that I had not changed my mind, and that if that's what they were here to talk to me about, they could just leave, because it would be a waste of my time as well as theirs. But they told me that they were not here to discuss the kids and the financial help that they needed from me. They were apparently here to talk to me about our relationship as parent and child. I found that very confusing because 6 years had passed, and we had not spoken to each other properly. So I didn't think it was necessary for us to discuss things now. But I still let them speak because I wanted to see where they were going with this. To my surprise, they actually acknowledged the fact that they had never treated me fairly and had been very cruel to me by not even trying to be there for me when I was struggling with money. They said that they were really apologetic for the way that they had treated me, but it was just that they had never expected to have a second child and told me that I was more or less of an accident, so to speak. They went on to explain that because of me and my mother's sudden, unexpected second pregnancy, they had to put their plans on hold indefinitely, and eventually ended up not being able to accomplish anything that they had set out to do in the first place. Apparently, their plan in the long run had been to settle into a more traditional lifestyle where my father would be working, my mother would become a stay-at-home mom, and my dad planned on quitting his job and starting his own business. My mother wanted to stay at home and take care of my brother, but when my mom got pregnant for a second time, they did the math and realized that it would be impossible to sustain this kind of lifestyle on just one income. If my dad tried to quit his job at that time, it would be even more troublesome for our family. New businesses take time to break even, and he couldn't take that sort of financial risk. And even though they were not happy about it, they still decided to have me and put their plans on hold. But with time, they just started finding more and more excuses not to do what they had initially set out to, and they didn't even realize it. But at some point, they had started subconsciously resenting me for it. And that's why they had always acted like that with me. But now, they were here to finally give me an explanation as to why they had never been there for me as a kid, and why I was treated differently, and to ask for forgiveness for that as well. It was a lot of information to take in, so I literally had to sit down on the porch steps because I was finding it hard to process all of it at once. Considering the way I was treated my entire life, it did not come as a surprise to me that I was unwanted and unplanned. Also, the age gap between me and my brother kind of gave it away. But the fact that they had actually resented me for something that was not even my fault was what really broke me, because suspecting something was off in my relationship with my parents was one thing, but hearing it straight from their mouths, I was not prepared for that in the slightest. So, after a few minutes of silence, I told them that I wanted them to leave, and that I would let them know what my response to all of this was later because, at the moment, I was still struggling to process all of this. They were respectful enough to leave after that, after telling me that they were really sorry for the way that they had treated me once more. Then, after they were gone, I went back inside the house and told my wife everything that my parents had said to me, and then, I don't know why. I just broke down into tears after that, and she had to comfort me because I was extremely emotional. I cried myself out for a couple of minutes, and once I had recovered, I started thinking about what I would say to them. I know that I'm not obliged to actually respond to them, and I don't have to talk to them if I don't want to. But I feel like this is something that I really want to address. Frankly speaking, I haven't even thought about whether I want to establish a relationship with them after this or not. Everything is a mess in my head right now, and it's going to take me some time to really come to a decision about what I want to do. Update 3. Today, I finally sent this email to my parents. I'm just going to paste it here because I really don't have the energy to elaborate. This is what I sent. Before I get into what I have to say, I would like to thank both of you for coming to me and at least trying to clear the air. I really appreciate the fact that, even if it was a little too late, you guys still tried to make things right. But in spite of that, like I said, it was a little too late. I can only imagine how it must have felt to give up on your dreams because of an unexpected pregnancy. I know that it could not have felt good. I can understand that you guys were upset about it, but honestly, that's not a good enough reason to have treated me the way that you guys did. I always felt like a second-class citizen, even in my own home. I cannot explain to you how horrible it was to know that no matter what I did, my brother would always be treated far differently and better than I would ever be. I started realizing that nothing I ever did would matter in the end, because my own parents were never going to be impressed with me or even care about what I was up to. I don't think you guys understand how horrible that felt, and I really can't even explain it because unless somebody was in my position, they wouldn't have any idea. To think that it took you guys so long to realize that you guys had made a mistake by treating me like that is very sad. I still feel like I'm not important enough for you guys because that's what I've had drilled into my head for years and years, and I cannot undo all that damage with just one apology. I need my space, and I need time to process this, and I can't even tell you that I might be ready to reconcile with you people after a while. The truth is, I just don't know. I don't understand why it has taken so much for you two to realize something simple and basic. You can't treat kids badly their entire life and expect them to still be there for you when you're older and need them. So, I'm really sorry to say this, I really do value the apology and explanation for your behavior, but I think I'm going to stick to my decision to remain no contact with you guys. Maybe I will feel differently someday, and then I might come to you guys myself to reconcile and make things right between us. But for now, this is the conclusion that I have come to, and I really hope that you guys will respect this and not reach out to me again until I'm ready. Thank you so much. Update 4. So, it is almost midnight right now, and 6 days have passed since my last update when I sent that email to my parents. After that, they did not reach out to me, and I thought that they were going to respect my decision to not be in contact with them until I was ready to speak to them and fix our relationship. This evening, however, my wife and I decided that it was an unrealistic expectation for us to have, thinking that they would actually respect anything that I had said. Both of us had just come back home from work and were freshening up when the doorbell started ringing incessantly. When I went to check who it was, I realized that my parents were standing outside, and both of them looked very annoyed. So, I opened the door, and I told them that I was not ready to talk to them yet, and I think I made it sufficiently clear in the email itself. But my dad said that they had read the email several times over the course of the past couple of days, and they thought that I was overreacting and that it was really not that big of a deal, and that by now, I should have come to terms with this. They said that they had apologized to me in the hopes that maybe I would soften up towards them and try to understand their struggles as well, but instead, I only seemed to care about myself and how I had felt. My mother accused me of not even caring about all the sacrifices that they had made since my dad had spent his entire life working for somebody else, when all he had really wanted to do when he was younger was build something of his own. But he had let that opportunity go and let the time pass him by because of me. And even she had made a lot of sacrifices for me and my brother, and while at least Carson had an excuse. He had just lost his wife, which is why he couldn't be there for his family. I didn't even have that sort of excuse. They claimed that I was being self-centered by not taking into account all that they had given up for me, and I was still acting like I was the only victim in the situation, without thinking about what they were going through. Then my dad said that the email had been ridiculous, and they had thought about it for a while, but that they couldn't respect this idiotic decision of mine any longer. They were here to sort things out with me once and for all. It was a really weird approach to take, to be honest, since if they really wanted to sort things out with me, as they claimed, they should have taken a different tone with me. But they were getting really aggressive, and I didn't like that. Also, I had just come back home from work, so I was very exhausted and cranky, so I kind of burst out at them. I told them that they were the ones who were being idiots, because if they really thought that one half-hearted apology was going to make up for everything that they had put me through my entire life, they were wrong. I told them that I owe them absolutely nothing since they had never treated me with any sort of respect. I also reminded them that I had been very polite to them in my email, and even said that if they respected my decision to not talk to them just yet, then I might have found it a bit easier to reconcile with them in the future after I had processed this on my own time, and they don't get to dictate whether the way I'm reacting to something is an overreaction or not. So if I think I don't want to speak to them at the moment, I'm not going to do that, and they can't force me to. My dad tried to interrupt me, but I just screamed at him and shut him down, telling them both that I would call the cops if they didn't clear out. After cursing at me for a bit, they finally left, and I went back inside to tell my wife about the conversation that we had just had. I was fuming and ranting to her, and after I was done, she told me that she should have seen this coming. She explained to me that when my parents had come here to apologize to me in the first place, she had kind of sensed that they might be doing this because they had realized that now, since Carson was gone, they only had me to rely on in their old age, and they were only trying to emotionally manipulate me to forgive them so they could mooch off of me since they were both retired now. And when I decided not to forgive them so easily, they got mad, and that's why they were here to pick a fight with me and maybe somehow get me to forgive them by bringing up how much they had sacrificed for me. And I agree. I had kind of thought along the same lines, but I didn't want to outright accuse them of anything because I still wanted to give them a chance in case that apology was genuine. However, after this recent fight, I know that it most certainly was not, and the only reason that my parents were trying to make amends with me was because they knew that they couldn't count on Carson anymore and needed me to be on their side. My wife and I agreed that we really dodged a bullet by deciding not to forgive them and have no contact with them, even after their apology. We were able to see right through them, and they didn't like that, which is what led to the confrontation today. I'm just glad that they showed us their true colors, and we were not fooled. Update 5. Hello everyone. I haven't checked Reddit in a long time, but I logged in a couple of days ago and realized that I had received a lot of comments on my old posts and updates. It has been almost 6 months since I last posted an update, and I guess this one was long overdue. So, of course, most people want to know how things worked out with my parents. And we are happy to tell you guys that we are still in no contact with them. And we are probably going to be that way for a long time in the future because, after that last fight that we had, my parents had their lawyer call me up and tell me that they were going to cut me out of their will and leave everything to Carson and his kids. And I told the lawyer that if they wanted to hurt me, then they would have to try much harder. Since then, we have had no interaction because I guess they forgot that I really didn't care anymore, and I'm really glad that we don't talk. Because from what I know, they are only getting more insufferable with every day that passes, since they're still talking crap about me on their social media, and my relatives just laugh along. Which is fine because I know that I'm doing better than them in life, so it doesn't really matter to me. As for Carson, I heard from a cousin of mine that he made a reappearance and took his kids with him so he could relocate to his new job in LA. He was completely MIA for 2 months and then out of the blue. He showed up at our parents' place and apologized to them for putting them through so much, and then took his kids with him. I'm glad things are looking up for him now. I hope he's able to take care of his family, and I genuinely wish him nothing but the best. He has had enough trouble in the past already, and even though we're not exactly on speaking terms, I don't think of him as a bad guy either. Now, coming to my wife and I. Remember how we had said that we planned on starting our own family? So, we finally did that, and in just 6 short months, we are going to have a baby, and we have never been happier. We made the announcement a couple of weeks ago, and Carson congratulated us and wished us luck for the future. And my parents decided to put up a cryptic post about how grandparents never get their dues on the same day to seek attention, which is expected. Either way, my wife and I are thrilled, and we are looking forward to this new chapter.